Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, and as we all know, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's correct, ladies and gentlemen. Robert Meyer, Burnett, and I am Rob-casting at you once again from here inside, deep inside the Robservatory, where I am surrounded by the flights of fancy of others that I love, that continue to inspire me over and over and over again. This is episode number 444 of Robservations, the show about something coming at you, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community, you imagination connoisseurs. There is a truism, people, a truism that I've learned in life. It's been proven to me time and time again, and that is, no one is better at fucking up science fiction, fantasy, horror, genre, whatever you want to call it, fan communities than other fans. We are the best at it. I don't know if it's a Christopher Guest, like best in show kind of thing. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but it's been proven to me time and time again that if you have some kind of a community, a fan community of any kind, a club, one day, there's going to be something that happens in it because of people in the club. And I'm not saying those people in the club are right or wrong. I'm just saying there will be static. Sometimes that static will be existential, and it'll destroy whatever community you have. Hey, maybe you're putting on a Renaissance fair. You know, maybe you're arguing over your names in the Society for Creative Anachronisms. I don't know what it is. Maybe your D&D group has a schism. Your Star Trek fan group. Doesn't matter. And anybody who's ever been in a group knows exactly what I'm talking about. I'll tell you a funny story. So, when I made Free Enterprise, I mean, I've been the guest of honor at various events for a long time. Over 2 decades. For various things I've done, or I've been at professional fan events like Comic-Con. I've spoken there. But there have always been times when you go to fan-run conventions. And by the way, I've been a fan all my life. I've been going to fan-run conventions my entire life. Seattle used to have, I don't even know if it's still there. I'm sure it's not. But when I was a kid growing up, they had a large Star Trek fan community called the PSST, the Puget Sound Star Trekkers. They haven't had a cool logo where the PSST formed the Enterprise. And I went to their events. And I usually was the youngest person there. And they were delightful. And I had a very good experience. And I was always made to feel welcome at these events. So I've been going to fan events literally my whole life. But, so, I guess I can't say, let's just say I went to a foreign country. I went to a foreign country as a guest of honor at a fan event. A European country. This is about, 18 years ago. And when you get to these events, you don't know the lay of the land. And when I say that, I don't mean the lay of the land in France. I mean the actual fan event that you have been invited to, that you're the guest of honor. Within that fan circle, whoever's put on that event, there are hierarchies and there are factions. And you don't know anything about them. You don't know. Because you're the guest of honor. And so my thought whenever I go to one of these conventions is that if someone has flown me someplace, or maybe they're giving me per diem or putting me up or something, it's a great honor to go. So I feel that my job, and I'm there basically 24/7. Like if I'm in a foreign country, someone's brought me somewhere, I'm at their disposal for whatever, the day or 2 or 3 that I'm there. And I like to party and I like to hang out. So from the time I get up in the morning to the time I go to bed, it might be a 24-hour day. And when I was in this particular country, it was. And I had a fantastic time. So I feel that it's my job to be there and to interact with people the whole time. Because I'm a fan too. So I have a lot of fun doing it. It's fun for me. But what ends up happening and this has happened more than once, but I figured I'd bring this up because it was off the top of my head. What ends up happening is you, by doing this, by making yourself available and hanging out with people, you inadvertently cause static within the fan group that has brought you to wherever it is you're going. Because you have no way of knowing the different hierarchies within whatever organization has brought you there. Like there is like the close-knit people that run the organization, and then there's people that are just part of the organization. And so there's all kinds of, well, there's politics involved in these organizations that you don't know anything about. And in doing so, like, I will inadvertently piss somebody off because I will be spending more time with somebody that isn't part of the governing body of the organization that's brought me there. But there's no way for me to know. There's no way for me to know. I just, talk to whomever, and if I vibe with somebody, I'm hanging out with them because I feel like I can't know. So I try and be an ambassador, and I try to do the best job I can do to make sure that I've provided the best experience to whatever fan organization has invited me, because they brought me there. And if I didn't want to go, I wouldn't have gone. But if somebody brings me there, and especially to a foreign country, I feel I'm obligated for all of my waking hours to meet people and have a good time. Plus, that's fun for me. That's what I love. I get to go someplace and meet people I've never met and hear their stories. How did they become fans? What is the fan experience in a foreign land? It's clearly different than it is here. But you always find out that it's politicized within the organization. Certain people might feel slighted that you're spending time with. I mean, there's no way to know. And it doesn't matter. You could be at a film festival. You could be at a convention. You could be at whatever event. It doesn't matter what it is. When I say fan events, it could be anything. It could be anything that's being put on by organizers that are bringing you somewhere. And I think the reason for it is, and I think part of the reason in my life lately, I've also encountered this problem, is that my fandom and my professional life have always, lucky for me, have always sort of gone hand in hand. On some, and by the way, it's also been detrimental to my professional and fan life, because people are like, Rob, if you were less of a fanboy, you might have a better career. That's true, but on the other hand, if I wasn't such a fanboy, I wouldn't be enjoying the career that I have as much as I do. So it's been, and that's been the case my whole life, my whole professional life. I started, again, working in a video store when there were no video stores. There was only very few, and they were very high end. And I was lucky that during my junior high, high school, and college career, I worked in home entertainment from 1980 to 1988 in retail. And one of the things that helped me do is I could speak publicly, I could talk to anyone, and it also made me, for the most part, and it also made me very aware that there are all different kinds of people in the world. But when they come into your sphere, I was more interested in letting them be who they wanted to be, and I would learn from them. And being an adult, when I was younger, I was around adults, so I heard all different kinds of points of view. So I never, I might have objected to what I heard, but I never really said anything, because I just kept my ears open and listened and tried to understand where everybody was coming from. And you quickly realize that people are coming from all different places. If you're the center of a circle and you're dealing with people all around the circle, you're going to find people at every second hand with a different opinion or a different thought or something, and you just never know. I also learned that you should never judge somebody because of one thing that they've said. That was something that was very apparent to me, because people have many different kinds of views. And one of the things that I grew up realizing is that somebody might have a vehement disagreement with you about one topic, but you get along on every other topic. And that doesn't mean, I mean, I always would judge people based, at least I thought so, holistically, on their, what I knew of them all around. And sometimes I would have disagreements with people, and that would be the case. Now, that didn't mean I didn't like them, and that certainly didn't mean I was going to rush to pillory them. I would hope that your entire life speaks for itself, not one moment or one tweet. Now, one of the things that I've also learned, especially over the last couple of years, is my fan life has been going on since I was a little kid to now. And I have seen fandom change and grow, and it's vastly different than it was when I was a kid, because everything has gone mainstream. All of it. Everything that I loved, I've watched this giant pendulum. All of these geeky interests have now gone mainstream. There's a reason why Avengers Endgame is the most successful movie ever made. And I've watched all of these things that I love since I was a kid permeate all of culture, and it's all gone mainstream, which is terrific. But I guess I have sort of a different perspective on it than other people. And more, I don't want to call myself wise, but when you've seen fan communities grow and change, and you've seen the very things that we're fans of become so mainstream. And what's also very interesting is I exist in a world which I'm fortunate to exist in, where I'm kind of an elder statesman in this space. And I'm dealing with mostly people that are a lot of the time, much younger than I am. Whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, 25 in some cases, even 30. And I'm working with those people all the time. Now, I can only see the world through my perspective. And there's a lot of the time when I've been working with people that are significantly younger than I am, that they might, it never occurs to me that they're looking at me in a maybe an unfavorable light. But to a certain extent, I can understand that. I mean, as old as I am compared to them, I could be like, why are you doing these things? Don't you have things that are better to do? Or you're kind of the creepy old dude who's prancing around in, say, jackets and screaming and yelling. And why are you doing that? Shouldn't you be elsewhere? Shouldn't you be doing something more important? Well, the difference there is that, yeah, like this week, for instance, a movie that I produced for Warner Brothers came out on Blu-ray. You've heard it a million times. I know I'm belaboring the point. But there are people that don't know. There's people that I work with that have no idea that I do that. They don't know. They only see one facet of what I do, and they don't know anything else about me. And it's interesting because I just assume it's not like you walk around with your resume or your IMDb or whatever and tell people, because you don't. I've also learned that because I've done so many different things, wherever you are, whatever you're working on, that's what people want to hear. They want to hear that you're working on their project, you're focusing on their project. You can't roll in and go, well, let me just tell you, when I was working on this movie in this foreign country, blah, blah, blah. Nobody cares, because they care about the project that's at hand. And I have found, look, I talk enough about what I've done. I've got my own show. There's many people don't even know I have a show on YouTube, nor who have listened to it. So there is, and now in the world that we live in, the snap judgments that are made about people, literally you make one tweet people don't like, they might not look at the 100,000 other tweets that you've made. You'll be judged by one. And all the work that you've done, all the stuff that you've done, none of that matters. That one tweet can be how you're judged. Same is true if you're in fan organizations. Like suddenly, I might do one thing wrong, or if I walk into a situation that I'm not. That's why when you go to these events, as a guest of honor, a celebrity guest, I don't think of myself as a celebrity, but if you go there, you have to be hyper aware. And a lot of people don't know this because, a lot of times there's a lot of people that are new to going to fan things. They've never been there before. So they don't even know. I mean, I'm more aware of it than most because I've been part of it. So it's a strange world to inhabit nowadays, to be part of a fan community or to have a professional life and a fan life, then, because people don't know what to make of that either. So, and everybody wants to pigeonhole you and judge you and all this, and it's a very strange place to live. But that brings me to the topic I wanted to discuss today. Now, this show began with one of my moderators, the very first episode of Robservations, not the live chat, but the one and only episode. I conceived this show. I wanted to make, like my DVD special features work, I wanted to do documentaries. And I realized there was a lot of work in doing documentaries about people. And the first and only one I did was about my friend Greg Smith, who is in a few Star Wars costuming groups. And one of them is the 501st Legion. And it's a great organization. A lot of people are asking right now, what is the 501st organization? But I'm going to talk about what that is. I'm going to read from their website. I'm going to read from the 501st website about what it is. Basically, in a nutshell, the 501st VADER'S Fist is a Star Wars costuming organization that is worldwide. They have garrisons in cities and countries all over the world. And basically what they do is enthusiasts make costumes, make Star Wars costumes, and then people that are part of those groups, they go on, they do what's called trooping, where they go to charity events, they put on shows and they raise money. And this is all it's organized. It's actually very organized. And Lucasfilm has given the 501st their blessing. And they've been doing it for a long time. Now let me read. This is from, they have a website, 501st, 501st.com. And this is our mission. From Article 1 of our Legion Charter. The Legion is an all-volunteer organization formed for the express purpose of bringing together costume enthusiasts under a collective identity within which to operate. The Legion seeks to promote interest in Star Wars through the building and wearing of quality costumes and to facilitate the use of these costumes for Star Wars-related events, as well as contributions to the local community through costumed charity and volunteer work. To promote interest in Star Wars. While a growing number of people are experiencing a reawakening of their Star Wars fandom, new generations are seeking ways to celebrate their passion for George Lucas's modern mythology. The 501st Legion brings these fans together, reinforcing the enduring longevity of the Star Wars saga. To facilitate the use of costumes, some fans are content to collect action figures. Other fans want to be action figures. Nothing professes your passion quite like building your own detailed costume replica of a classic Star Wars villain. And there's nothing quite like the feeling that comes from bringing the characters of Star Wars into the real world and sharing the magic with others. To contribute, while our organization was founded to simply provide a collective identity for costuming fans with similar interests, the 501st is proud to put its resources to good use through fundraising, charity work, and volunteering. And then in addition to this Legion Charter, you can also review operating protocols, charter evolution, and council resolutions. Now, if you go back and you watch the first episode of Robservations, not the live chat, but just Robservations 1, you will meet my moderator, Greg Smith, who I've known since junior high school. And he is my age, and he joined through his own interest in costuming, got back involved, at my age. I hope he won't mind. I call him middle age. He's a married father, and he built his own house with his bare hands, and he's always been an incredible artist. And he got back into Star Wars because he loved Star Wars and costuming. We first recreated a costume that he'd made when he was 13, and it got him into it. And then he got into the 501st. He's built a 1-to-1 scale land speeder with his group, and he's gone trooping, and he's raised money, and he's done all kinds of charity events. So full disclosure, I learned a lot about the 501st. I mean, obviously, I've seen the 501st and heard about the 501st, but I learned a lot about the workings of the 501st through Greg. And I have to say, Greg has been nothing if not incredibly complimentary about the organization from the get-go, and always enthusiastic about it, and has done a lot of work locally up in Washington State. And the things that they've shown me, I mean, I went to a convention. We both were at a convention in Wenatchee last year, 2019, in April, and the groups, the 501st, did a whole display. They brought Greg's 1-to-1 scale land speeder out there. Greg had also built a 1-to-1 scale Imperial probe droid named Priscilla, Queen of the Glacier. And they had built a full-size Tauntaun. I mean, it's not just costuming. They'll also do 1-to-1 props. It's amazing. And Greg and his team are currently building a 1-to-1 scale snowspeeder from The Empire Strikes Back that was going to be on display at various conventions this year to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Empire. Unfortunately, COVID-19 curtailed that. Well, like I was saying earlier, there has been a great disturbance in the 501 force. And I've been hearing whispers about this until the other day when people started sending me stuff and asked me if I would talk about it. Now, this comes from a blog, Costuming, Cosplay, and Costume Clubs 101. All things costuming, cosplay, and costume. I'm going to put this link. I'm going to put this link in the chat. So this is the article I'm about to read, and you can go find more stuff out there. Major costume club drama. 501st LCO ousted in an apparent coup d'etat. This June 16th, 2020. It was posted yesterday. We've observed different types and degrees of costume club drama over a period of more than 10 years, but never have we seen something as grand mal as this. In a secret hearing held by the world's largest costume club, the 501st Legion, the club's president, called the Legion Commanding Officer, or LCO, was found guilty of a minor offense and sentencing her to a 6-month suspension from the club. This effectively removed her from the position of LCO that she'd been elected to in February 2020. How did this happen? Well, this is an incredibly long story if you try and sit down and read the entirety of the reams of copied forum posts that have been made public, but we'll try and summarize it here as best we can. The LCO, under her authority to oversee the club, questioned the leadership of the UKG, the 501st local chapter or garrison in the United Kingdom, about their charitable donation practices, which include the possible misuse of collected funds, as well as the possible intimidation of UKG members to donate in order to be permitted to participate at club events. In other words, pay for play, which is a violation of the 501st's charter, as is the possible misuse of collected funds. Members of the UKG leadership accused the LCO of humiliating them on their forum and brought charges against her. Using the club's bylaws, the Legion leadership then held a hearing, a secretive hearing that the overall membership had no knowledge of until it was too late, in which the LCO was found guilty and sentenced to a 6-month suspension, effectively removing her from the position of LCO. Now, I've heard, after talking to some folks, that this hearing wasn't done necessarily, might not have been done. I don't know. I can't speak. I can only report what I heard, that it hasn't been done, maybe not quite all on the up and up. But let's go further. Here are the problems with what unfolded. It is highly questionable as to whether the LCO actually humiliated anyone. This has the appearance of accusing her of something to prevent her from finding out what the United Kingdom garrison was doing with the collected charitable donations and how they were being collected. While the United Kingdom Garrison leadership claims that their charitable donation practices are completely legal, no independent review has been conducted to verify this. The United Kingdom Garrison's vindictive reaction to the LCO questioning their charitable donation practices gives the impression that they are indeed hiding something. Ultimately, the secretive hearing and the removal of the LCO under questionable circumstances has created a massive backlash and argument among the 14,000 plus member strong costume club. Keep in mind this costume club is worldwide. And also keep in mind that the 501st Legion operates entirely. Its existence is dependent on a blessing from Lucasfilm and now Disney. So if you're raising money for charity, especially in this format, in this form, it would be my advice to make sure that at any one time, an organization that is dependent on, I mean, you could do anything you want, but if you're so tied into perhaps the most lucrative IP in the world as far as movies go, you cannot have any hint, any whiff of impropriety, especially on this level, because you're threatening to have everything taken away. So, like Spock, you have to be better than the average Vulcan here. You have to be the best. There is no margin for error. And this kind of internal squabble, this internecine squabbling, it's not good for anyone. A Reddit post on this subject states the following, though we cannot verify the claims. Over the weekend, the Star Wars costuming group, the 501st Legion, suspended the membership of Dawn, quote, Kylo Ren Bright, after she attempted to investigate charity money mishandling by the UK Garrison. This was done in a closed-door hearing with membership unaware of the event until its conclusion. This hearing was pushed by a subgroup of the 501st known as Project Mayhem. Well, for anyone who's seen Fight Club, you know what Project Mayhem's all about, and I get it. Vader's fist, but Project Mayhem, if there's a group pushing this, a subgroup called Project Mayhem, again, the optics, I don't know. The unofficial group of the 501st members being referred to as Project Mayhem is not something we are familiar with, but its existence is entirely plausible but unverified. The Reddit post goes on as follows, but that claims are not fully verified. For the past year and a half, there's been a movement inside the 501st Legion to attack and harass the Midwest Garrison, the Chicago group, over issues over the Star Wars Celebration Chicago event. This group has attacked the Chicago folks, accusing them of stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars, while the Chicago folks have responded that because of one of the previous heads of the 501st and the actions of him removing their nonprofit tax ID from some of the celebration events, the Chicago group owed thousands for some of the 501st events at Celebration Chicago. During one of the latest hunts by this group, Project Mayhem started to make demands that the head of the 501st, Dawn Bright, who is known for doing a lot of the work on the Kylo Ren costume, go after the Chicago folks. During this fight, Dawn brought up that the UK Garrison, Project Mayhem has multiple UK Garrison members, appeared to have some very funny financial stuff going on, using a data scraping app that reported that the UK Garrison had over $4 million in their bank account. She also leaked a video of UK Garrison members talking about this charity slush fund account. A huge argument ensued over her bringing this stuff to light. Flash forward to May and into early June. The UK Garrison pushes for a harassment charge against Dawn, claiming that her questioning the financial stuff involving the $4 million was her attacking individual members. There is a private hearing. Many of the images are screen grabs from these private threads, and she is found guilty of a minor offense per the 501st Charter. They then decided to suspend her and remove her from office. All of this was done without the general membership's knowledge. Membership woke up on Sunday to find that their elected leader was now banned from the site and stripped of her title. Keep in mind, Project Mayhem has gone against multiple members over the past year, often with ties to the Chicago group or individuals that have spoken out against their abuse of power, bullying, harassment, and fear tactics. Suffice to say, that enough 501st Legion members are sufficiently angry that they copied all of the relevant internal dialogues both on the official 501st forum and on the UK Garrison forum to shed light on what occurred. And in this link, this is the incredibly long document that we referred to earlier, which you can see because I put the link to this particular article in the live chat. According to the same Reddit post, and we have independently verified, Albin Johnson, the man who founded the 501st Legion over 20 years ago, posted the following statement on this very troubling subject. I find it absurdly ironic that certain UKG members, for all of their fine points, act like babies whenever any criticism is leveled at them. If material is brought forth, then just defend it, like you expect everyone else to do. Seriously, the amount of second-guessing, assumption of the worst, skepticism, patronizing, and condescension leveled at any critic of UKG policies speaks to some kind of overcompensation that itself is suspicious. Don't like an LCO? Badger away at them for a few months. Don't like a ruling? Hit the bully pulpit about it when you get back. Not happy with running a completely unconventional operation that no other garrison runs and being tolerated for it? Just complain you're being persecuted somehow. I didn't agree with the execution of Dawn's process. Note, I was conspicuously silent instead of jumping on board. But to have her suspended for bullying? Seriously? What kind of upside-down, one-sided logic is running here? None of the most prominent, consistent critics of Legion Command would tolerate even the slightest degree of criticism and questioning from inside their own units. That stuff is snuffed out. But they're happy to do it here. They eat up all this free speech and make the most of it to sow dissent, not progress. But back home, forget about it. Their critics remain silent or disappear outside of any Legion oversight. The future of this club is this. Unless people get passionate about bringing a positive environment and worthy goals, then the forum members getting their yayas over beating people up as a sport will run the entire show. This club is the laughingstock of every Star Wars fan group, media outlet, and convention partner we have. I hear it in sidebars on almost every meeting I have with them, and all the way up to the top. Lots of sighs and uncomfortable head shaking. They work with us because the niche we've carved out for ourselves, many of the newer and louder voices, had little to do with that, by the way. Now history tells me that my above criticism will elicit a rebuttal wave of criticism against me personally. Okay, fine. And gasps of disbelief as if I'm disparaging the good name of the final Legion. Someone will likely assume a fake high ground to trumpet how awesome we are in spite of how bad Legion Command has gotten. And this will serve to show that they still have the best interests of the Legion at heart. But they don't. No one can be more proud of the Legion than I am. I built this system along with all the freedom of speech that allows haters to breed. Oh, the regrets sometimes. But like a proud papa, that's right, I'm your daddy, I speak hard truths out of love. And like a bunch of surly, privileged teenagers, those of you who spent the last 3 years spewing negativity and printing up PM swag like a bunch of anarchists won't listen. You are zealots. Zealots are intractably right, never open to change, obsessed with a feverish goal of domination. The rest of the Legion is too nice or too easily bored with arguing over this anymore, and don't come onto the forums. They're out there actually making the club look good. All the while, the grass under their feet turns brown. So here's my future of the club prognostication. Use the forums to hammer out good policies. Joke around like brothers and sisters. Build one another up over costume projects. Spin wild ideas for future plans for the club. Work out solutions for real-world challenging like social distancing, or else this endless cycle of one-upsmanship will drive out the last of the fun people and be left for the scavengers. Will Disney stomp on us then? No, Disney will likely not impose any restrictions on us because they want to keep their consumers happy, and we're too big now. You're not too big, just so you know. But another club will eclipse us, and the 501st will be a relic because it was hopes and dreams that got us here. None of this was built on what we have going on now. The choice is yours. Now, when I read this, I couldn't help but think that it's a microcosm for what's going on in the rest of the world. Now, here you have an organization that's been around for 20 years. It services fans. It's a good organization. It does a lot of good work. if you've ever seen the smiles on kids' faces when they get to participate in a 501st event, it's truly something magical. It's truly, I think, it's the best of what Star Wars fandom and indeed fandom in general represents. And I think that not unexpectedly, what ends up happening is, like with me, having feet in two different worlds, you're a fan on one hand and a professional on the other. There's a lot of people that get very wrapped up in these clubs. It becomes the focus of their existence. They've got, and it might be because, you make choices in life. Like, what is it that really gets you or makes you happy? And a lot of the time, making Star Wars costumes, I'm very happy when I'm building Starship models. And if you're an incredible costumer or a cosplayer, you could almost make it your profession. When I looked at my friend Greg Smith, our moderator Greg Smith, when I looked at the work he did on his Boba Fett costume, quite frankly, it's pretty ingenious. I mean, building fans into the helmet to keep him cool when he was trooping, walking on the streets for hours on end. I mean, the kind of creativity that's in these fan communities is extraordinary. And with modern technology the way it is, whether you're 3D printing something, however you're designing something, whether you're hand painting things, it's just extraordinary the amount of creativity. And I would hope things like that would never go away, because you want to be encouraging that kind of creativity in everyone. I mean, can you imagine you're some 5-year-old kid and you go to a 501st event and you get to meet your heroes? 5-year-old kid doesn't understand, like, well, this is the 501st. They just dress up on the weekends. No. When a kid like that goes to one of these events and he meets Boba Fett or he meets Chewbacca or Princess Leia, it's just like going to Disneyland. You're meeting these people for real. In your mind, it's real. And if one of those characters is nice to you, your favorite character, that could be a moment that is indelible your whole life. It could set you on a journey of discovery and creativity that, well, even middle-aged men with one foot in their grave like myself can still feel inspired by. You just never know. So, and this kind of infighting that exists in these groups, and by the way, I think everybody should watch a Christopher Guest movie, Waiting for Guffman, Best in Show, to get some insight into what's happening here. I understand that people's identities get caught up in these things. But at the end of the day, you have to realize what's really important about these events and what's important about these groups and what's important about something like the 501st is not about you. It's about the organization. It's about the ideals that this organization is trying to espouse to the public. But also, it's also about, well, you're representing a multinational company and you're advertising their product. You have to remember that this kind of infighting, especially when it comes over, if you're a charity organization and you've got $4 million in the bank, you better be damn well accountable for every single penny. And you better have, I don't know, an accountant, have a spreadsheet, be ready to open those books, because you could wind up in a world of hurt. Take it from me. I know what it's like. If there's one thing I can tell you, I know what it's like to be part of a fan project that came into a lot of money, and how it could all go horribly awry. Let me just say that. It's very important that people be careful. And look, you've got to be better. You've got to be better than other fans. As a matter of fact, you've got to be the best fans out there. And I hope, because I think that the 501st Legion is a wonderful organization. And I think that it's done so many good things for the communities around the world. It's done so many good things for families and kids. And, well, even old fuckers like myself, it can inspire us to get back in touch with our own fandoms and re-engage with our own creativity. Maybe offers a whole new lease on life. I mean, heck, if you're cosplaying Obi-Wan Kenobi now, you can probably cosplay him until the day you die, and maybe that makes your life that much happier. I think it's important. And I think, I understand. I've just seen so many of these science fiction groups and conventions and things, and they disintegrate under this kind of infighting. It's kind of like the fan communities. You know, people are always asking me, Rob, why are you talking to all these different groups? There are people that want to say, like, you can't talk to them. They're such and such. Well, like I explained, I learned a long time ago that if you're going to ally yourself with people, only one kind of people, you stop learning. You've got to learn about, you can't make those people. There's all kinds of people in the world. And if you're only talking to people that you agree with, well, then perhaps your ideas get a little stale, and maybe you can't pretend those people aren't there. You can't just tune everybody out and decide, hey, I'm not going to talk to those people. Those people are jerks or whatever. Look, we have to live in a world where more than ever now we're learning that other people's experiences of the world and other people, we might not quite understand who and what they are. And I think all kinds of understanding is important nowadays, even in fan communities like this. And maybe we can use it, as a teachable moment. Because like I always say, it's like, look at it this way. You've always seen people, you might have friends that are in relationships that you don't understand. Why is that girl with that guy? What is she seeing him? Or why is that guy with that girl? I can't stand her. But you know what I've learned in my life? Another truism, that nobody truly understands a relationship between two people except the two people that are in the relationship. And until you're one of those people, you don't have all the facts. You don't know everything. You can only be an outside observer. And unless you've delved into these things to make these judgments about people, and now we live in a society where not only are people getting judged, but there are people in their righteous fury will tell you they're doing the right thing by making those kinds of judgments. I don't think that's necessarily true. People's lives can be destroyed in an instant these days. I think we all have a greater responsibility to one another. And it's something that we all need to think about moving forward. And I hope that whatever rebellion is brewing in the 501st, that the true spirit of fandom, the true spirit of what's there, allows them to move past this and keeps the organization as vibrant as it is. Anyway, I don't know what you guys thought. I just thought it was a really interesting topic to discuss. Now, along those lines, there's an article I wanted to talk about that was in the Hollywood Reporter today. And this was an essay, basically, written by Will Packer. And Will Packer is a prominent producer in Hollywood. He's produced things like Stomp the Yard and Obsessed and Ride Along and The Wedding Ringer, Straight Outta Compton. He's got a lot of great credits. Although I will say, Will, to be fair, buddy, I really respect you as a producer, but you did produce the remake of Jacob's Ladder, and I one day I'd like to talk to you about that. But he's a very esteemed producer in Hollywood, and he wrote, I thought, a terrific article that was in the Hollywood Reporter. It was in today. It was published today. And it was published at 6:30, and it's by Will Packer himself. And I have to say that I really love when I really do love when people that I respect also can write eloquently, and I just like hearing from them. And let's see. I have this recurrent... By the way, here's Will. Here's a picture of Will. Let me get that. There he is. So here are the words of Will Packer. I have this recurring thought about how I would pitch the movie version of the year 2020. I imagine that in my well-rehearsed presentation, the Amy Cooper Central Park section is where the room of all white executives I'm pitching politely put down their pens and stop taking notes. So let me get this straight, Will. The entire world is on edge after months of lockdown during a global pandemic, which looks down at notes, disproportionately affects black people after Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor became the latest names on the black tragedies list. Some random white woman named Karen. I interrupt. Actually, her name is Amy, but she is a Karen. Okay, so this random woman who has no relevance to the story of 2020 before this point, checks notes again, weaponizes her white privilege, but doesn't know she's being filmed. well, the way white privilege works, I start to say, and all of this happens before the George Floyd murder video is circulated worldwide. And that brings us to the end of Act 1. Crickets. Well, where are we on the girls' trip to ideas? Unbelievable, horrific, inconceivable. All words my white friends and colleagues have used when speaking to me about the George Floyd video. It's very different with my black friends. There's this kind of unspoken, constant discomfort that black people live with. Like having a dull headache that's always there. But you go on about your life, so when it flares up into a skull-crushing migraine, surprised isn't an appropriate word. There's this generational wariness that weighs on black people. Someone used the analogy that if you punch even the most docile person in the face long enough, eventually they're going to say enough is enough. But that's not really apropos here. The more accurate analogy is if you punch someone in the face for a lifetime and they die, then you repeatedly punch their kids in the face and they die. What we're watching now are descendants hundreds of years later saying, enough, damn it. That lifelong worn-down feeling manifests itself in strange ways. The constant mental pressure of feeling the need to overachieve, justify your value, justify your purpose, hell, your existence, has a vertigo-like effect. I find myself having robust internal debates. Do you push back on all the microaggressions? Yeah, otherwise the offenders won't even know they're doing it. You've got to call this stuff out. No. Who has the energy for doing that all day? Besides, I need the energy to keep overachieving at the highest levels. Do I urgently raise my voice in my professional capacity to ensure my perspective, whether popular or not, is represented in rooms where I'm the only black person? Well, obviously, that's why I'm in those rooms. If I'm not doing that, then what am I there for? Well, wait a minute. Aren't I there to be successful by Hollywood's economic standards so that I can empower, enrich, and open the door to many more Will Packers? Of course, one can do both. And I pride myself on doing just that. But the point is, it's exhausting. Speaking of exhausting, as I typed this, parts of my home city of Atlanta were burning. Again. An unarmed black man, Rashard Brooks, was killed by a police officer. The mayor fired the officer. The police chief resigned. Fed up and tired, protesters flooded the streets. Weary, fatigued police officers were called in to quell disorder. The cumulative effect of decades of racial conflict and angst is wearing on us all. Still, there is a reason to believe that this moment may be a real catalyst for change. I've actually had some promising high-level conversations with folks in this town who are showing interest in enacting real change. Mind you, the chasm between the sincere desire to foster change and true substantive progress can be infinite, and that work is what will ultimately define this moment. Hollywood has mastered the art of self-congratulations. We won our successful parallel parking adventure on Ventura, splashed across the Hollywood Reporter. This isn't a moment for that. When you are so far behind in almost every area of real advancement as it relates to one specific race of historically disenfranchised people, you don't get a victory speech. Leave that for your kids' kids. Maybe. I recently put out a social media call to action for hate crime legislation in Georgia. Oh, Georgia, that wonderful giver of tax credits. That amazing filming location that makes first class on Delta's LAX to Atlanta route routinely look like the Soho House elevator, while at the same time making Hollywood very uncomfortable because, well, Georgia. It's easy for my West Coast friends to forget sometimes that Atlanta is a city that happens to be inextricably linked to a whole lot of smaller towns and counties that surround it. You know, the state. Many of these areas are where Confederate flags and anti-women's rights sentiments fly in church parking lots. I fully plan on calling my Hollywood comrades to help in the fight to finally put a hate crime law on the books in the state. Exhibit 1 for this pressing need are Ahmaud Arbery's murderers, who spewed a racial epithet over his dead body just a few hours from what T'Challa and the rest of the Avengers were filmed saving the world. In spite of it all, I remain hopeful and optimistic for the future. I think here is a genuine desire to make this moment about more than the moment. I may not see true systemic equality in my lifetime, but I've already seen changes and momentum that I wouldn't have predicted 6 months ago. Future generations have a chance to do something truly dynamic and world-altering with the foundation being laid today. The elections in November will speak volumes about where we want to go as a collective nation. I remain sanguine about the possibilities. If only those execs would let me finish pitching, I think they would have loved the Hollywood-style third act comeback. Again, I like that. I like what he said. I thought his point that he made was a good one. And I think the same is true, of things like the 501st. Now, I don't mean to equate what's going on in the nation today, the racial unrest, the political unrest, the craziness, COVID-19, all of it, with what's going on in a fan community. But still, we need to start listening to each other. We need to start being less quick to go after somebody for words they've used, or we must understand each other. No matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, we all have to listen to one another. We have to just stop with the accusations and stop with the screaming and yelling and just listen, man. Because if there's one thing that I've learned, and if there's one thing I've learned working on films, and as I've said before, working on movies is a microcosm of society, because there's all kinds of people on a movie set. And the only way that a movie set works is if, one of the things I love about working on films and television is when you have what's called a page turn. And all the department heads, and they all have to do different things. Their concerns on a movie are way different. Let's say I'm directing or, producing, but if I'm creatively thinking about certain things, when you're at a page turn, what you do is you sit down around a table. Everybody's there. Sometimes I've actually filmed page turns on $200 million movies, and there's 50 people sometimes, or even more, sitting around a table, and you literally turn each page of the script and discuss, what does every department need? What is every department in charge of? The director explains what they want. The producers explain usually what's going on, the logistical problems, and everybody gets to chime in. You don't argue about it. I mean, you can have discussion, but everybody has to chime in when you're doing that page turn, because you have 50 different departments, or you have 50 different people that need to deliver different things. So on the day, you got to make those 12 hours. Whatever you're shooting that day, all of those people have to chime in and make sure that they have what they need to accomplish the goal. It's not just one people. It's not one side or another. It's 50 different people. And they're all chiming in. And you know what? It's polite. It's never cantankerous, because all of those people understand that they're there for the same purpose, which in this case is to make a movie. If we want real social change, we should be doing the same things. I'm not saying we can have a page turn, but it kind of would be nice if you could get a bunch of people down and sit around a table, no arguing. You just state what it is that you need, and everybody weighs in, because they have to. Being cantankerous or screaming and yelling at other people, that's not going to accomplish your goal. So, anyway, just my Robservations for today. Let's see what you guys have to say. I got a lot of letters. Woohoo! Actually, not only do I have a lot, I do have a lot of letters actually today. I got a lot of letters. And you know who's up first today? I'll tell you. Jeffrey Mao is up first today. Jeffrey Mao is up first because he actually sent me a letter yesterday, and I was going to read it, but I forgot. So he's up first today. Hi, Rob. As the British would say, I made a dog's dinner of my recent tip about Bruce McDonald and Pontypool. So I figured I would just write a letter on it. As I mentioned, the reason why I remember Pontypool is that it was... By the way, Pontypool is a horror film. So I figured I would just write a letter about it. As I mentioned, the reason why I remember Pontypool is that it was first discussed by the guys on the Film Junk podcast. Film Junk was, I believe, my very first foray into following film and entertainment punditry. Film Junk was Sean Dwyer, Jay Cheel, and Greg Gaspari, three film fans and friends who lived around Hamilton and St. Catharines in Ontario, near Toronto, for those unfamiliar with the good Canadian geography. They would get together every week to discuss and review new films, news, and whatever else came up. Jay was, or still is, a budding documentary filmmaker as well. It was always fun to listen to their experiences at TIFF each year, the Toronto International Film Festival, as they would watch a lot of films and discuss it on the show. The connection with Pontypool is that the film is set in a small town in Ontario, and I believe, if I recall correctly, that it was filmed in or near one of the guys' hometown, or just in the area that they lived. The film stars good Canadian kid Stephen McCaddy, best known for playing Hollis Mason, the first Night Owl in Watchmen. He was also one of the bad guys in good Canadian kid David Cronenberg's A History of Violence. Pontypool is about a radio station host who discovers that a deadly viral outbreak is happening in his town, so might be an interesting film to visit given the current situation. The podcast broke up after a couple of years and the crew went their separate ways. I still see them pop up on social media every once in a while. Later on, I changed over to listening to the Screen Rant podcasts, which were pretty good when Kofi Outlaw was still with them. After that, it kind of lost its way. I then listened to the Hybrid News Network podcasts for a little while, but they were never consistent in getting their episodes out, so were thus always hit and miss. Just a short letter to get my thoughts across about that. If anyone has ever listened to the Film Junk podcast, let me know. Thanks, Jeff. Well, Jeff, would it surprise you to know that I have a little bit of a link to Pontypool? Yes. When I was on, well, I call it the festival circuit, when I was on the festival circuit with the Hills Run Red, I actually met one of the producers of Pontypool, a somewhat controversial figure that I wasn't aware of just how controversial he was. But I met him, Jeff Coughlin. He was one of the producers of Pontypool, and he ended up becoming a producer on Free Enterprise, The Wrath of Shatner, the Free Enterprise sequel. And it was because of him, I blame him, that we lost our funding. But anyway, for those of you who want to find a really interesting film, I really like Pontypool a lot. It's based on a novel. It's got a very, very interesting spin on the zombie genre. And if you haven't seen it, I definitely think that you should, because it's pretty damn good. Let's see what I got here. Let's see what is on deck. A lot of letters today, man. A lot of letters. Pretty good. Patrick Deal writes in. Patrick Deal says, "Hello, Rob. My name is Patrick, and I'm a writer-actor. I found you while watching the John Campea show, and I was really inspired by your knowledge of the film industry. You spoke about how movies are made in fascinating detail, to which I wanted to learn more. I recently checked out some of your work, The Hills Run Red, and was just inspired with how its completion meant for me. That anything is possible. I recently wrote a feature script that I want to be able to pitch very soon. With your expert knowledge, I'm hoping it wouldn't hurt if I picked your brain a little bit about getting financing for my script, or maybe going about pitching it to studios. I don't have too much under my belt for them to take me seriously, but I'm hoping you could maybe guide me in sort of what approach I can take. I'm always excited to see you on the John Campea show, and just recently found your channel, and I couldn't be more excited. I look forward to hearing from you and learning more about what I can do. You can either email me back or respond on your show, as I think other creators could learn something as well. I love your channel and keep it up. Patrick." Well, Patrick, thank you very much. Might I suggest, actually, okay, one more time. Might I suggest that you pick up the Scream Factory Blu-ray of The Hills Run Red. Even if you can't stand the movie, and there are many who might not like this movie, we delve into the process. I think what I'm most proud of about this Blu-ray is, especially the new special features, we delve into the process of how this movie got made. And look, I won't lie, it's almost easier these days to land on the moon than it is to get a project made in Hollywood, especially if you're outside the system. My suggestion really to anybody in this day and age, my biggest advice is, why wait for somebody else to allow you to do something? We now live in a world, when I was growing up, access to a decent camera and film and processing was monumentally expensive. Now you have Steven Soderbergh making movies for Netflix on iPhones. I mean, literally, if you know what you're doing, now I'm not saying that anybody can just pick up an iPhone. talent has to be involved. And like anything else, it's interesting. If you think about like music, you can go buy a guitar almost anywhere now. But having real musical talent is hard. And especially breaking through and playing gigs, it's a lifelong avocation. And you bang your head. I mean, even The Hills Run Red took 3 years from soup to nuts. And there were times when Dave Parker and I kept looking. I remember having lunch with him. I've talked about this before. I want to say we were at a diner on Van Nuys Boulevard. I don't know the actual name of it. I know where it is. Like if someone said, meet me at this place, I'm like, oh yeah, I know where that is. It's on Van Nuys Boulevard. It's not that far from Ventura. It's on the west side of the road, and it's pretty glass. It's got a lot of glass. And I remember him and I sitting in front of each other because they greenlit the movie, but it was almost a year from the time we actually made it. So while they told us 2 weeks after we made our presentation that the movie was greenlit, it was almost a year before the movie went into production. And during that time, we weren't getting paid. We still had to work, still had to make. And at that time, I was in, for various considerations, I was not in the best financial shape, borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. I had a lot of projects that I had juggling, and it was a difficult time. And there were times when we would be sitting in front of one another. Keep in mind, this is after we already got our project to the studio, and they said, yeah, we're going to make this movie. Well, it was a year later that we actually got to go make it. So we would just sit there and stare at each other. I remember this one particular lunch. It's like, dude, is this ever going to happen? That was probably Dave saying it to me, and I was always the cheerleader going, yeah, man, it's going to happen, dude. It's going to happen. But, you have to keep telling yourself that. But I really would suggest to anyone in this day and age that if you haven't come from outside, if you come from outside the business and you think you're going to write a script and somehow get it to Hollywood, I would give up that notion. Because it's hard enough for people that are working in the business who even have Academy Award nominations to get their next projects off the ground. And to be on the outside, next to impossible. On the other hand, nothing is stopping you from making your own film. If you look at all the great success stories recently, I mean, Soderbergh making Sex Lies of Videotape, Kevin Smith making Clerks, and countless other independent filmmakers. Spike Lee, She's Gotta Have It. I mean, a lot of these filmmakers figured out ways on their own to make their first movies. In this day and age, it's never been easier to make films than it is now. However, it's just as hard as ever to make good movies. Making good movies is extraordinarily difficult. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. I mean, one of my favorite low-budget independent movies of all time is Don Coscarelli's original Phantasm. I love Phantasm. He shot that movie like over 3 years, like on the weekends, and he made it, and he didn't give up. Yeah, he made movies before Phantasm, like Kenny and Company, but he didn't give up, and he made it. No one else made it for him. And, he made that movie over 40 years ago. I still love it. And the only way to succeed now in this day and age, I think, especially if you want to make movies, make them yourself. Now, I'm not saying, there is still, do I want to make studio movies? Sure, I do. I want to make studio movies still. I'm still working on, I've got one particular project I'm putting my all into to get it made. And, it's a little too expensive. I can't make it on my own, but I'm doing everything I can to take it up to the point to prove how viable it is. But that's what I would suggest. And again, you've got to assemble a team. You've got to go find good people to help you make that. But that's kind of what I would say. But it's a hard road. What is that song that Sade sang? Long Hard Road, I think, or The Long Road, off Soldier of Love. By the way, what an album that is. It's a long, hard road. That song is so good. Just keep listening to that. That'll inspire you. Get that Sade album. Get Soldier of Love and get that song and make that your mantra. Because it is. But so's life. Anyway, Dean Mikitich is here. Hi, Rob, and the Post-Geek Singularity. A few weeks ago, we were told that another Star Trek series was on the way, which will focus on the Enterprise with Pike in command and will have Spock as his science officer and third in command. Strange New Worlds will be the title. They managed to come up with that name far quicker than they did for Picard. Actually, you know what? There was a series of 10 books called Strange New Worlds, where actually Pocket Books used to run a contest every year for budding writers to submit Star Trek stuff. They picked the very best stories, and they released them as in their Strange New Worlds anthologies. They did 10 years of that. And I would hope, rather than the writing staff that, Akiva Goldsman heads up, they should just go to those books and find stories to adapt. I kid. From the announcements, I got a few red flags right away. The first red flag, it's going to be a prequel. Star Trek has never been about looking in the past, and it has always been about looking toward the future. Up until 2009, when the last vestiges of Roddenberry's Star Trek were taken away. Now it's all about going back and retreading ground, because after all, that's easier to do. I never liked the idea that Rick Berman was going to do a prequel with Enterprise when they announced it. I hate the first 2 seasons when I first watched them. That's not to say that I did not enjoy a few fair episodes. It was the premise of the show that I was not keen on, as it did not really pay off in the first 2 seasons. The 3rd season took a radical turn, and it was better than the first 2. Then we got to the 4th season, where the show really found its footing, and what the first season should have been. Enterprise. Can you imagine if season 4 of Enterprise was actually season 1? I mean, where could that show have gone? Enterprise should have been a show about humans' early days exploring the galaxy, and each season setting the seeds for the series finale, the formation of the United Federation of Planets. I've gone back and re-watched Enterprise, and I've come to enjoy those first 2 seasons. Still not a fan of the overall story of season 3, but it's enjoyable. But Enterprise worked as a prequel. Why? It is set in an era we know very little about and has characters we know nothing about. This is why it worked. Then you got to Discovery, which is set 10 years before Kirk took command of the Enterprise. The look of the show looks nothing like that was seen in the original unaired pilot. The stories are bad and very un-Trek-like, and none of the characters are likable, which brings us to Strange New Worlds. Already we know no matter what happens on the show, the 3 characters are going to live, Spock being the obvious one, given that we've seen his life in the original series, movies, and the Next Generation 2-part unification. We know what happens to Pike in the Enterprise, so the writers can't put them in any peril, where we don't know if they're going to make it or not, which only leaves number 1 as the unknown element of the show. I don't know what Kurtzman and co-fixation is on this part of the Star Trek timeline. With the exception of Lower Decks and Picard, every new Star Trek show announced seems to be set in this era. Roddenberry and Berman have created an expansive universe in which to play in. Stop playing in a part of it that is beloved and add your own mythology to it in an era we know nothing about, i.e. post-Voyager's return to Earth. The second red flag is the same people behind Discovery and Picard are making this. Why would CBS allow it? If those shows are really doing great on CBS All Access and International, why are they not giving viewing figures? They're not giving them because they must be bad, or really bad. Let's face it, if Discovery was doing well on Netflix, why would they walk away from Picard? They would have snapped it up in a heartbeat otherwise. Now, both of those shows do have their fans, but the majority of people hate them. Which brings me back to my question of why would CBS let the same people make another show? Okay, Kurtzman has a 5-year deal in place to oversee Trek, and we're either halfway through that or just over it now. CBS would be a fool not to have clues in the deal that Kurtzman does not perform. He can be let go early. So why is he not bringing someone that can make proper Trek instead of using the same people? His production company would still make the thing, so he would not lose out much if he did. The third red flag related to the last one. The people behind Trek have lied not just to the fans, but their potential fans or customers. They have told us that Season 2 of Discovery and Picard would be Trek-like and would be faithful to what has come before. I've been burned 3 times from these lies. 2, mentioning above, and a 3rd time with J.J. Abrams saying Khan would not be in his second Trek film, and yet he was, and the fans saw this coming from a mile away. Kurtzman was also one of the writers behind that. I'm glad that I have not put any money into this version of Star Trek, given that we have been promised one thing and got something very different. Those financiers must feel burned after 2 shows that have not made a return on their investment. I've got to the point where I no longer believe a word they say. How about they put their money where their mouth is and show us instead of telling us? The 4th red flag came today from a video by Midnight's Edge. They reported it as a rumor, but given what they did to Spock in season 2 of Discovery, I would not put it past them and for the rumor to be true. Why, oh why, do they want to change James T. Kirk into a bisexual? I have no issues with anyone's sexuality, but Kirk has been and always will be a ladies' man. So why change that part of his personality? How does it add to the story you want to tell that will involve him? In Star Trek Beyond, they changed Sulu from being straight into being gay. Yes, we never got to see Sulu with a partner before this film, and we only know that he had a daughter in Star Trek Generations. But when it was revealed that he would be gay, it was not the fan community that was the most horrified by this, but George Takei himself, who is gay. The people behind Beyond said it was done to honor Mr. Takei and everything he's done for the LGBT community. Mr. Takei said it was a slap in the face than an honor. If you want an LGBTQ character, don't change an established character. Create a new one who is. Also, don't try and shove their sexuality down our throats. Don't make it a focus. That can turn people off. Just make a note of it and leave it at that. Did the producers of Deep Space Nine make a song and dance about Sisko being black or a single father? No. It just was, and everyone accepted it for what it was, and it has to be one of the best depictions of a single parent on any TV show, black or not. I want Strange New Worlds to be good, but before it got out of the gate, it got too much going against it. But hey, it could all be a moot point anyway. The financiers have been burnt with Kurtzman one time too many since 2009, and his production company can't seem to get the money together for this. Section 31 or another outing on the big screen because of it. It will just become another Kurtzman project in production, along with all the monster movies he's apparently producing for Universal, the Dark Universe series of films, and he killed that right out of the block. I guess for now, we will get more announcements of a possible future Star Trek project, but nothing will come to fruition until Kurtzman and company are gone, or they bring in someone that can get Trek back on track that the fans and money can get behind. Rob, what do you and the PGS think? Live long and prosper. All right. I'm going to say something that many people probably would not expect to hear from me. First of all, this idea that Kirk is going to be cast as being bisexual in the new show, I don't believe that. Because I'll tell you something. That is not interesting. What we've talked about on the show before, and for those of you who are new subscribers or things that we've discussed, we had an ongoing debate on if you could have sexual relations with an alien species, would you? And we brought up the example of, for instance, Sarek and Amanda, Spock's parents, obviously. And then we were talking like, I mean, would you, if I met an Andorian woman with her white hair and blue skin, I could go there. Like, I could fall in love and have relations with an Andorian woman. And then the ongoing joke was that I couldn't hook up with an alien xenomorph. Assuming an alien xenomorph and I could relate on we could talk to one another or whatever. I just couldn't bring myself to have sexual relations with an alien xenomorph. Now, it's funny. It's funny to think about. But it's very interesting to contemplate the idea in the Star Trek universe, like whether the preserver race was seeding humanoid life throughout the galaxy. That's why there's so many in the Star Trek universe. It was dealt with in a 6th season TNG episode called The Chase. So the galaxy was seeded with humanoid-like creatures. And I was saying that, okay, I could go there. I think I could hook up with an alien. Now, here's the thing. Kirk, and I remember, he's my fictional hero. I love Captain Kirk. I've always found sexuality of any kind very compelling, whatever kind of sexuality it is, because what turns people on is a combination of things, and a lot of it has to do with your imagination. The mechanics of it all can be fairly silly if you look at them, but if you relate to them from a creativity standpoint, like the person that you're with is equally creative or equally wants. I mean, when you think about procreation's one thing, but human sexuality, like all the things that we do, all the things that turn us on, are very complex. They're very complex, and they have to do with our personalities and behavior and all that. I could see Kirk not just being a ladies' man, but I could see Kirk being a fan of sexuality in general. I certainly could relate to that. So the idea, I think that James Kirk, if he's a fan of sexuality, that I could see him hooking up with a different species. Like, and if I think they did an episode like The Outcast, where Riker obviously fell in love with Soren, who was from an androgynous race, I could see them doing an updated version of that where a young Kirk falls in love with maybe a race that is genderless or something. And you could even have a man play the part. And Kirk could absolutely fall in love with someone. To say he's bisexual is so, I mean, make it science fiction. You know, make it go further. Tell the story of what are the ramifications of that. When you fall in love with someone from an alien race, how is that perceived? How does that work? I wouldn't mind that. I wouldn't mind that at all. I think calling James T. Kirk, you know, being bisexual, to be honest, fine with me. It depends if it's put in a storytelling concept or conceit. How does that, I mean, he could still be a ladies' man. That doesn't remove, it doesn't remove that from him at all. But if he's a fan of humanoid sexuality, you know, maybe he enjoys same-sex couplings or whatever. But it's a Star Trek show. It's a science fiction show, and it should be allegorical. So why not have Kirk have a great romance with an alien race and delve into these issues of what does that mean? And of course, having an interspecies relationship is allegorical for everybody here on our planet, which is when Star Trek's at its best. So I don't have a problem if they're going to do that. I hope they don't make it by just saying, ooh, he's bisexual. I mean, I think that whole thing, I don't necessarily believe that report, but why not make it really interesting where you can really drill down into this subject matter? And, you know, what would that mean? I think that could be kind of cool. This is from the Justin here with my kaiju letter. Rob, I'm really worried about Godzilla vs. Kong. Not worried that it won't be as glorious as the title suggests, but worried that audiences just won't get it. The separation between Asian kaiju and our American monsters are miles wide. While they share similarities, our films are much more aligned with the American sensibilities of grounded storytelling. In short, an inherent lack of fun and wonder, whereas kaiju films are the embodiment of high fantasy. Yes, Godzilla's origins are deeply rooted in science fiction, but fantastical elements are woven into the themes of each film. At one moment, Godzilla can be a walking representation of nuclear destruction. In another instance, he can be a protective father defending a goofy son and his friends. Asian genre fiction, like kaiju and tokusatsu, are fluid. It can appeal to large swaths of homeland audiences while still being niche enough to garner a cult following elsewhere. Modern American monster movies? Not so much. Prior to King of the Monsters' underperformance domestically, Western audiences had been reintroduced to Godzilla twice before, each time taking a very grounded approach to the iconic character, and both times completely missing what initially made these films so great. The fun, larger-than-life battles. Gareth Edwards' 2014 Godzilla wasn't terrible, but it lacked the punch that makes Godzilla so popular. Certainly some good ideas were there. Showing these Goliaths from our human perspective gave the scale of the destruction much more weight. But at every moment, Edwards would turn the camera away from the action, covering our eyes and grinding the pace to a halt. Everything from the antagonistic Motu designs, Motu, to the overemphasis on evacuating the city felt derivative. Godzilla 2014 is a post-Cloverfield monster movie. Ooh, I love that. Having more in common with something like Jaws than any other film in the series. Despite its attempt to appeal to more cynical audiences, it still failed to reach the heights Legendary Pictures was hoping for. The reason why I fear for Godzilla vs. Kong, however, is mainly due to King of the Monsters' mixed audience reception. As a fan, I'm thrilled with every new piece of news that comes out of this production, but as a realist, I know that more movies like these just don't resonate here in the U.S. King of the Monsters, like Pacific Rim before it, let go of any pretense of reality and gave in to the genre's fantastical origins. Mike Dougherty embraced the fun of characters like Rodan and King Ghidorah. The movie uses the monster battles to drive the plot, not the other way around. King of the Monsters was as different from Edwards' Godzilla as possible and still lacked a strong domestic box office. I have to throw Pacific Rim in there as well, another legendary film. I remember having a debate online with a friend who thought the final act of King of the Monsters was far-fetched and cartoony. It didn't make sense, he kept saying. Everyone would be dead within a 100-mile radius, he shouted. For a fan like myself, I thought the climax was not only a brilliant nod to burning Godzilla from Godzilla vs. Destroyer, but also fits so perfectly in the hyper-reality where creatures like this would exist. Yo, man, I am with you 100%. However, you know what's very funny? I think Man of Steel has the opposite thing. Is that Man of Steel didn't have that larger-than-life truth, justice in the American way. Superman has a great big heart, and he's rescuing kittens from trees. Man of Steel made everything, it's the exact opposite. People want their giant monster movies to be ultimately realistic and not embrace the whimsy. But when you do that with Man of Steel, and you make it more realistic, and you leave the whimsy or the idea that Superman would never let anyone get hurt, it's the exact opposite. However, I'm very aware that my friends' tastes are more in line with the vast majority of moviegoers, the vast majority of American moviegoers. Their suspension of disbelief tends to only be stretched as far as an intergalactic warlord traveling through time and space to confront a Norse thunder god, Iron Elon Musk, and a perfect progressive non-racist super soldier from the 1940s, all for a magical glove. But, you know, a giant dragon with atomic breath is going a bit too far. I get it. We Americans are used to grit. We don't like to engage in anything that can be considered kid stuff, so we constantly look to ground our fandoms in realism. This is why the 2017 Power Rangers movie is shot like Chronicle meets Snyder-era DCEU. The filmmakers wanted it, too, to be as different as possible from the 90s Kung Fu Kid soap opera, despite that the original Super Sentai series still having a strong following in Japan. This is why superheroes themselves are constantly being deconstructed, so that viewers can feel they're engaging in content that is maturing with them. So this hunt for realism in our giant monster movies, while similarly misguided, is not surprising. When in truth, quality fiction is not based on realism, it's based in believability. Is it realistic that a man can fly? No. But can I believe a man can fly? Yes. I envy Japanese audiences. They still seem to have a strong grasp on why their franchises became popular in the first place. There's a huge emphasis on authorship, artist integrity, and tradition. This is why mediums like manga and anime, while seemingly strange to our American eyes and ears, have some of the largest fan bases and longest-running series in all of fiction. I suppose what separates us is our incessant need to validate what we are interested in. Culturally, we have stopped allowing ourselves to give in to whimsy. Sadly, I feel the 80s was the last bastion of truly whimsical high fantasy. Every once in a while, we may be reminded of Lord of the Rings, but will we ever enter into another generation of unbound storytelling? Will we ever embrace the inherent fun and wonder of genres like kaiju? Are we so different in our priorities that we can't suspend our disbelief just a little bit more? I don't know. Maybe I'll try and change that. Despite this mini rant, I sincerely hope I'm wrong, and Godzilla vs. Kong is great. I know I myself will most likely enjoy it, and I hope we can all cheer united when our Lord and Savior Gojira puts them hands on that Donkey Kong wannabe. The Justin. P.S. Shin Godzilla won Best Picture at the Japanese Academy Awards. It is often debated between fans if it was deserving. It very much so embodies the conflict between the modern grounding of fiction and the traditional fantasy genre. Well, the Justin, let me tell you, obviously, as many people who watch this show would know, I loved your letter. This is exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. I mean, I was really surprised. I mean, normally I think my box office prognostications are usually pretty dead on. I really do. I think I'm pretty, if you were to go back and look, I've only had a few real missteps. And when I do have missteps, they're big missteps. I thought that Pacific Rim would blow the doors off. I thought it was going to make $1 billion. I love Pacific Rim so much, and like my only criticisms of it are the Chinese triplets when they're fighting in their they get defeated too quickly. We needed to see them tear somebody up before they were defeated. That's my only criticism of that film. I love that film. Loved it. I mean, when I watched Gypsy Danger dragging a oil tanker to use later as a baseball bat, and when the kaiju it was fighting sprouted wings, I lost my shit. And I understand that a lot of people, I think that you just nailed it. We've talked a lot about that on the show, how, I mean, I grew up with giant robots and monsters, and I loved all of those things. And I found that's why I love King of the Monsters so much, is because it absolutely embraced the essence of what those movies were at their best. And but that's not what American audiences are primed for. And I do think that's, look, people have talked about making a space battleship Yamato or Star Blazers live action film. The live action film that came out in 2010 in Japan was kind of disappointing because of what they did, the Gamelons, but I understand why they did it. But they tried to make it more grounded and more realistic, and I don't think it entirely worked at all. And I just think that it's like we've talked about this a lot. The American sensibility, we don't have whimsy, not in our fantasy. We want our fantasy to be more grounded, and I think it's really difficult for a lot of people to watch things that have both. They want things one way or another. And great letter, though. You got to look. I think inherently, I don't know what people are expecting from a movie called Godzilla versus King Kong, but the very concept, it's the same thing when you're making Freddy versus Jason. It's there has to be an element of whimsy even in the very idea about doing it in the first place. So if you don't go into it, like, I don't expect Gone with the Wind or War and Peace or whatever historical epic you want to call that. Or better yet, The English Patient, something like that. Gandhi, whatever pick your historical epic. I don't expect that from a movie called Godzilla versus King Kong. I mean, I do want a certain grounded realism, but I also want it to have, like, it's kick-ass to watch Godzilla fight King Kong, and it's a real tough one. And I don't think we have quite mastered this yet. And we'll see. Well, hell, Olenti is here. Olenti, one of my favorite members of the Post-Geek Singularity. Have not heard from her in a while. Good to have you back. She's amazing, by the way. Greetings, Rob. I hope you're faring well. I was watching your discussion on the John Campea show regarding the Oscars implementing a diversity requirement for eligibility. I won't comment on the requirement since I wasn't able to find any particular info about what requirements would be in place. I know, neither were we. I will say, based on the comments I've read, people are already up in arms about something that hasn't even been implemented yet. What I do want to say is diversity does not equal black. I noticed in your discussion you asked, what about Asian cinema and Indian cinema and world cinema? You posed the question, does that mean Parasite wouldn't be considered because the cast was all Korean? Or what about Crazy Rich Asians, which led me to believe you might be equating diversity with black. I think these films would certainly be included when you're talking about diversity, especially when it comes to the Oscars. I saw Parasite in theaters with my sister and about 10 other people total. After its Oscar win, more people took an interest in the film, and I thought that was an awesome example of how the recognition of an Oscar can make more people aware of great storytelling from various cultures. Merriam-Webster defines diversity as the condition of having or being composed of differing elements. Variety, especially the inclusion of different types of people, such as people of different races or cultures in a group or organization. The Academy is an organization that for a long time didn't embrace diversity. I think whatever they come up with to include films and filmmakers of various cultures, ethnicities, etc. is kind of overdue. I don't personally watch the Oscars, not because they're too white, but because they're boring, and half the movies I've never seen, or sometimes ever even heard of. So for my part, I couldn't care less if they're diverse or inclusive at all. But on the other hand, I do care because of the young people who are potential filmmakers, actors, cinematographers, etc., from underrepresented groups who might be included if there's no requirements in place. 93 years or so, right, and there's been very little inclusion and diversity until recently, without people speaking up about it. I've digressed, though, because the issue I had with the discussion was the implication that diversity equals black, which it doesn't. It means all underrepresented people in regards to the Academy, including Black, Asian, Native American, LGBTQ, Hispanic, International, etc. Feel free to correct me if I misrepresented your position that diversity wouldn't include these wide range of groups. P.S. I don't think movies like Braveheart are in any danger of not being made because of diversity and inclusion requirements. I like that movie. I wouldn't want it excluded because it's a period piece with an appropriately homogenous cast. I hope we continue to get great stories from great storytellers. Take care and stay positive. Well, once again, Olenti writes a great letter. No, here's the thing. I never thought diversity equals black at all. My point was that I wish Americans watched more movies from all over the world. And we don't. Unfortunately, we don't. And, what we're really asking for is diversity from the American perspective. That's what I think. And I don't necessarily think what all of this talk is and I think that's fine, because one of the things that we haven't heard enough from is the Asian, the Black, the Indian, the LGBTQ, all of these communities in America have not been able to let us hear their voices. Or certainly, we'll get the rare film now and again, but the experience of being Black in America or being Asian in America and growing up, that's what we haven't been getting enough of. And in this country, we have not done a very good job of promoting those voices. And as I've said on this show, the more voices that we have, the more people that are going to be able to make movies, we're going to get great movies. We're going to get movies that we haven't considered yet. And it's sharing those experiences that give us a much more diverse view of what does it mean to be an American. What does it mean to be an American? We have hugely shifting racial demographics all the time, especially with our Latino communities. And what does that all mean? What is the experience? And I think that we that's what we want, is we want those voices to speak up, and we want to know what they're like. Like I often talk about Fast Color, the movie Fast Color, which is basically about a multi-generational family of superheroic or superpowered Black women. And it was directed by a white woman. But I think it's an incredible film, and when people talk about superhero movies, very few people have seen it. And I think it's really interesting, and we need those kinds of voices. So my only point is that I also wish that Americans would look elsewhere for films. There are great films that have been made all over the world. And nowadays, when I was growing up, people went and saw foreign films. In Seattle, we had a very vibrant film community. So when foreign films would open, people would go. And I grew up watching films from all over the world. And I miss that. I think nowadays, one of the great things about Netflix that people don't really mention is just how many different shows there are from all over the world, which is fantastic. And I think, all of it will feed into allowing more and more voices to be heard, because I think that's what we really need. We really need now. Let's see, I've got so many more letters to read here. But I'm going to jump over and see what you guys are saying over here. So Willow's here. She says, my mom complains that people in modern movies talk faster and don't enunciate their words as clearly as people in older films, making it hard for someone like her to understand. Have you noticed this, and why do you think it is? Well, Willow, thank you. I think you're absolutely correct. I think the reason being is because back in the day, you had people that were coming from the theater, and studios were actually coaching people on how to speak, to enunciate. That was something that was all part of the training that a lot of people, a lot of contract players, especially female ingenues, were brought on, and they were trained in singing and dancing and speaking properly. But I think that is part of it. I mean, again, you had a lot of actors that were versatile that went from stage to screen, but knowing how to speak was a big deal because movies were much more theatrical than cinematic. The language of cinema has changed, especially over the last 40 years, but older movies, it was all about people speaking and less about the pyrotechnics of the language of cinema. So I think your mom is actually absolutely right. Rule the Obscure sends in a tip. It says, "Hi, Rob. Thanks for reading my letter yesterday. Sorry, maybe I didn't explain so well. Just to clarify, if you think Hobbs and Shaw or Howard Shore, that's a close approximation of how to pronounce the show in Showa, i.e. Shawa or Showa. That is good to know. It's kind of a drawn-out O, but your heisei is perfect." Anyway, foreign language is usually your fun thing with Claudius, so I'll leave it there. Showa or Showa. Yeah, it's tough, man. Have a good show today. Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. And thanks for supporting the channel. Lancelot Narayan is here. Have you heard? Disney is releasing The Empire Strikes Back in 4K in UK cinemas next month. I wasn't planning on going back until No Time to Die, and although I didn't need to see another Star Wars film as long as I live, I have to, don't I? What would you do? You know what? I would probably go see Empire in a theater if I had the opportunity. I totally would do that. Because, you know, why not? I absolutely think so. Dan V sends in a tip and says, "It was pretty disrespectful what Disney did with the use of the 501st. It was still Vader's fist, but it's no longer just with Vader. They were recruited as part of another legion called the First Legion that served directly under Vader." That was wrong. I didn't know that, Dan. I didn't know that. That's very interesting. Lancelot Narayan sends in a tip. It says, "Man, speaking of fan circles, I was heavily involved in Bond fandom. The petty bickering, the different camps, the who did what to who, it really poisoned my life. Not that I didn't make mistakes too, but I'm glad it's behind me." Dude, it happened. I told you, did I not? It happens to every fan community. Because the thing is, people take this stuff. Look at Star Wars fandom. People take this stuff so personally, and it's such a reflection of who they consider themselves to be. I also think that a lot of people, their fandom is in their own minds, it's one of their primary defining elements of their personality. So it becomes very personal. Very personal. And you feel like if someone's attacking your fandom, they're attacking you. And I totally get that. I see that. But, I mean, I guess that's why I've never kind of felt that way, because I've got my fandom also translates to my professional career, so I've always been going back and forth. So I've always had my professional career, so I've never been that wrapped up if somebody disagrees with me. Although there are people with my Star Trek fandom that punch my buttons. And they do because, especially on Twitter, people would come after me like even guys who are named Trek Splainer, you know, and they'll tell me they're coming at me like, "You're wrong and I know best." And I'm like, well, why don't we discuss it? You know, and they don't. Fans don't want to discuss. And part of being a fan when I was growing up is we did want to discuss. Part of the reason you would go to conventions is to have these debates with one another. Because for me, I'm like, I've never considered that. So you'd sit there and wind up in a 4-hour debate about Patrick McGowan's The Prisoner, which I actually did at Worldcon in 1984. And you would talk about authors and books, but nobody, I guess because you were doing it in person, and it was all good fun. But look, fan communities have always been hotbeds of backbiting, whatever you want to call them. Yeah. Stubble McShave says, "With a lot of genre going mainstream, it has resulted in less risk-taking due to financial reasons." Stubble, I agree with that. I mean, the problem is, you know, there's not a lot of people that really comprehend why people got into this stuff in the first place. There's so much of it now that people are like, well, just make it like this. And it's a bummer. It is a bummer. But yes, there's a lot less. Now everything's so genre stuff. Because genre stuff's gone mainstream, it's all become the Tiffany standard, and you can make so much money from it. So people throw in a lot of money. I mean, that's the funny thing about Star Trek Discovery. I watched Star Trek Discovery and Picard, and I'm like, they're spending all this money, but where they should have been concentrating on is on the scripts, and it's just weird. Evan Newman sends in a tip and says, having just watched The Irishman again, this 501st story could be turned into a geeky sequel to it. Just crazy. It is just crazy. It's wacky. It's very wacky. Star Wars Rock sends in a tip and says, well, it's now official. Gibraltar has had a 0 on the active COVID-19 cases today, so hopefully it doesn't start going up again. Well, I hope that's true, Star Wars Rocks. I hope that is true for you, because that would be a fine change of pace, I think. So I hope it stays that way. Let's see. This next letter is from James Kevins. Greetings, Rob. I guess we need to have this discussion again because our beloved Star Trek has an STD and it just won't go away. Have you seen the latest from Midnight's Edge? They dropped the video the other day about the recently announced Pike show. By the way, just so you guys know, I watch every video that Midnight's Edge drops on Star Trek. There's never one that goes by me that if a Midnight's Edge video shows up and it's about Star Trek, I will watch. So yes, I have seen it. They dropped a video the other day about the recently announced Captain Pike show. By the way, they ended that piece by giving you a nice shout out. I know, right? And recommendations that people check out your channel. By the way, I want to thank Midnight's Edge for that. I didn't pay them either. They just did it. I didn't even know they were doing it. To sum up the Midnight's Edge reporting, they're saying that the project has not yet attracted the financial backers needed to make the show a reality. Until they have somebody willing to pay the bills, it exists in limbo like the Section 31 show announced so long ago. I guess this makes sense because it ain't show friends, it's show business. It would seem that Kurtzman and Secret Hideout have been reworking the sales pitch, and they think they can gather interest by introducing a young James T. Kirk to the show, despite the fact that it violates canon. In The Menagerie, Kirk says he never met Pike until he took over command of the Enterprise from him. Midnight's Edge is cautious to note that they can neither confirm nor deny the rumor that they have heard Kirk will join the ship as Spock's bisexual lover. Well, I don't think they said that. And by the way, that doesn't really make much sense either, knowing Spock's character. My response is short and simple to that. No, no, and no. Absolutely not. It was disrespectful to the very core spirit of Star Trek. Gene Roddenberry was Star Trek. He already addressed this in the novelization of Star Trek the Motion Picture. Roddenberry said it didn't happen. Mic drop. End of story. If Alex Kurtzman's willing to turn the Pike show into a sausage fest, then I think I'm ready to give up on it before they even filmed a single scene. Rob, what are your thoughts on this, especially in light of the Roddenberry Star Trek the Motion Picture denial? Your brother in fandom, peace and long life, Jim Kevins. Well, Jim, if you're watching the show, you've heard me already address that. Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's also pandering. I think it's pandering. Why not introduce a new gay character, I guess? I mean, isn't that the best way to do it? I mean, I understand where they're going to go. I still do think the viability of having Kirk have a relationship with somebody outside the species could be really interesting. I would be all for that and delve into his sexuality that way, because that's what science fiction does. That's what Star Trek does, and it would allegorically be about that very thing. So, unfortunately, nowadays, who knows? Omar94. Hi, Rob. 2 things I don't typically like about blockbusters and sometimes movies in general is having to shoehorn kids and or love stories in them. For some reason, blockbusters typically put kids in the stories and have them be engaged with all the action. That's the problem I had with Godzilla King of the Monsters, where Millie Bobby Brown's character, for some reason, got shoehorned into the action with all the monsters. That was also a problem I had with Temple of Doom, even though I really liked the movie. For some reason, Indiana Jones has a kid sidekick, Short Round, accompany him on his adventures into dangerous situations. Where was Marcus Brody to help Indy? It would have made more sense if Brody was there. The only time I think kids in blockbusters work is if kids are the focus like Elliot in E.T. or have an integral role in the story like John Connor in Terminator 2. Maybe there's this thing about executives making sure blockbusters to appeal to kids, But you don't need kids in blockbusters to work. Look at Raiders of the Lost Ark, A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Terminator 1, the original Ghostbusters. Love stories are also annoying when shoehorned into blockbusters, or really movies in general. I like to think to myself that it's unnecessary to the story, or it just comes out of nowhere. I sometimes think to myself, when a love story comes up from out of nowhere, where the hell did that come? Speaking of Temple of Doom, the whole Indy and Willie Scott love story is an example of that. For some reason, she's tagged along for the adventure. Her and Indy flirt a little, and by the end of the movie, they kissed. That made no sense to me whatsoever, and I felt it was unnecessary to the story. In Raiders of the Lost Ark, the relationship with Marion worked since she had a role in the story, and her and Indy have a backstory. Jerry Maguire was also like that too. Don't get me wrong, I liked the movie, but I disliked the whole love story and felt it came out of nowhere. It didn't make sense to me why it was there. I think the movie would have been better if that part was ignored and the focus was solely on Tom Cruise and Cuba Gooding Jr. with the agent and athlete relationship. Anyway, maybe I'm nitpicking, but those are two problems I have. Thanks, and live long and prosper. Well, I agree with you to a certain extent. Not with Jerry Maguire, though. Because Jerry Maguire's, everything that he's all about, it was reflected in his romantic relationship as much as it was in his being a sports agent. I thought they really, really worked well together, and I thought the rift he had with Renee Zellweger was good. Because, he finally had somebody that loved him for him, and he didn't know how to deal with it because he had never loved anyone that way, and he had never allowed himself to be loved that way. So I thought it was a big part of the plot. But I agree. I mean, I don't think when you get men and women in close quarters, I think a lot of people found Kate Capshaw annoying, but I thought her character was great for that story. And she was easy on the eyes, and obviously she was quite the buxom woman, but she played that part well. I mean, she was the woman singing, and she was fronting the entertainment at a nightclub, and it wasn't like she was the sharpest tack on the board or anything like that. So, and I thought it was a throwback to other kinds of movies, so that didn't bother me. I like that, but I understand what you're saying. I don't necessarily think they need to shoehorn all of those things into every movie. I think sometimes it gets a little a little too much. This next letter comes from Kenny Crayley Jr. Dear Robert, hey Robert, the members of the Post-Geek Singularity, I'm back again with another letter, and for today's letter I wanted to talk about and share my experiences with Star Trek, so here it goes. I was born in 1983, and I did not see any Star Trek until the late 80s, seeing reruns of the original series on my local TV station, WUAB-TV 43, now CW 43 in Northeast Ohio, and then watch every new Star Trek series after that, including every new episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine and Voyager, the movies of Star Trek, most of the first 10 Trek films and TNG films. I've only seen one in the theater, and that was Star Trek Generations on opening night in 1994, and me and my father went to see it. And while the film was not great, it was nice seeing a Star Trek film on the big screen. The films of Star Trek, the first, some good, some bad. My favorite ones are The Wrath of Khan and First Contact. Then we come to the Kelvin era, the JJ era of Star Trek. Star Trek 09, I like some parts of the movie, but it did not work for me. Into Darkness did not work for me. It really did not work for me as a film, and Beyond was better, but just all right. The new Star Trek TV series have been 50-50, and I didn't like Discovery, and Picard was just okay, but the writing in both of these shows is so awful that they don't feel like the hopeful Star Trek I experienced growing up. And I don't know how to fix modern Star Trek stories. Let's hope modern Trek can get back to those kinds of stories soon. Thanks, Rob. Keep up the great work, and live long and prosper. Sincerely, longtime watcher, listener, and Star Trek fan, Kenny Crayley Jr. from Ohio. Well, Kenny, I can't disagree with you there, sir. Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know why the thought-provoking allegorical drama of Star Trek is not what it is. They're not doing that anymore, and it bums me out. It really bums me out, to tell you the truth. So yeah, it bums me out, to be honest. So I can't disagree with you. Jason S. is here. Jason S. says, white privilege is a racist term that is the N-word for white people. Oh, come on, man. I don't think, no. It's used to make white people feel bad because of their skin color and to brainwash them into subservience. Imagine instead accusing the Jews every day of having Jew privilege. Well, hang on a second. Easy, Cheetah. Hold up there now, son. I disagree with that. And I'll tell you why. Because the N-word is an actual slang. It's a terrible thing to call somebody. It is degrading, it's demeaning, it's a personal attack, and it is a word that is designed to humiliate, and it's not good. White privilege is a concept. White privilege isn't I don't think it's a derogatory term. I think, if anything, white privilege is more of a concept that should stop people to be reminded of the fact that we live in even now, a predominantly white country. And I'll tell you right away, I think the concept is used sometimes wrong by people. It's now become a crutch. But the concept, I think, is valid. You should always think to yourself, okay, what is it? What is the term white privilege saying? Well, when you grow up in a predominantly white culture that has a long history of racial injustice, and literally, remember, there were Jim Crow laws in the South, people riding on the back of the bus. That was white privilege. Literally, it was codified into law that white people had privileges that black people didn't. And that's, literally, it goes all the way back to there. So it's now there's less of those laws on the book, thankfully, but the idea of white privilege still exists. We might not have Jim Crow laws, and we might not have separate bathrooms or separate drinking fountains, but the idea of white privilege still exists. And it permeates our society. So the N-word is an insult. You are literally, you're demeaning. It's a personal insult. It is designed to diminish, to hurt. It's just a terrible word to utilize against another person. Whereas white privilege is a concept, and I don't have a problem with it. I think the important thing about the way it's being used now, the way it's being bandied about I think it's a stupid thing to say to people, because you're diminishing the conversation. You're trying to reduce it to some kind of a catchphrase where it's far more complex than that. And you have people saying, oh, you have to check your white privilege. I'm like, you know what? You have to start thinking better than that. Let's have a conversation. But anyway, Jason Bueno sends in a super chat and says, Rob, back to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Do you have the Souls Winter 3 issue run by Michael Zulli? I do not. Incredible dark fantasy art. There's also a color collected hardback. I do not have that, but I would watch that, or I would read that. Jeffrey Turner, a.k.a. Mega Jetty 1, sent in a super chat. I got film ideas, no means to make, but good stories. Well, Jeffrey, I have to tell you something. One day when I first moved to L.A., I saw a news report, and there was a woman that went around. I don't even remember what news station it was, but it was a local news station, and she went and interviewed them. She did man on the street, or women on the street, or I should say people on the street interviews, where she walked up to random passersby and she said, how is your screenplay idea coming? Now, it was edited together to make it look like every single person had a screenplay idea, and every person does. Every single person I've met or ever finds out I'm in the film business, especially when I go home to Seattle, somebody's always going, I've got an idea for a movie, or, my workplace could be a sitcom. So I would say that, Jeffrey, you're not alone. Many people have film ideas. And that's a tough one. It's a tough one. But I think that the easiest way, if you want to make movies now, the easiest way to do it is to actually go out and make movies. Because remember, all these people, like Kevin Smith, man, read the story of how he made Clerks. He just went out and did it. It's a Kangaroo sends in a tip and says, do old movies like pre-2016 movies that have been released in 4K Blu-ray really look better, or is it BS? Oh my God. 100% better. They look, I mean, I shouldn't say that. It really depends on the transfers. But yes, if you have a 4K disc that has HDR, HDR10, or Dolby Vision, it's a revelation. And I'll tell you something, modern movies don't look that much better. Modern movies don't, but films, I prefer films that were finished photochemically. Films that were finished digitally, I mean, they can be given an extra added oomph, no doubt. But I do think going back, that's why, like, Die Hard was a revelation in 4K. Blade Runner, a revelation in 4K. The Matrix, believe it or not, revelation in 4K. Because they really create the more filmic quality. A lot of people, though, you know, younger audiences are like, I don't like seeing grain. I guess it's really a preference. But, yeah. Bob Tozzi is here. He says, I was clicking through my Amazon Fire TV last night, and I saw that Zardoz was on Hulu. Couldn't click on that fast enough. Well, you know that every mention of Zardoz has to have the floating Zardoz head. By the way, Geek Santa, a.k.a. Cliff, gave me this. And remember, Zardoz speaks to you. We did Zardoz on Whining About Movies, so whenever somebody mentions Zardoz, I feel obligated that I must. I mean, by the way, people go, what is that? This is actually a Zardoz belt buckle. I've never actually put it on a belt because I like it too much. I don't want it to get hurt or chipped. But Cliff Stevenson, a.k.a. Geek Santa, another great DVD producer in his own right, got me that Zardoz belt buckle. So there you go. Bob Koal is here, and he says, if you decide to make the humans' actions or tech absurd in Godzilla movies, at least make the people likable or fun. That's been the biggest issue. Unrealistic human technology and action and poorly realized human characters. Otherwise, too many asks. I agree with that. You know, you have to do both. Although it's really hard to do realistic human characters. That's why I love Pacific Rim so much. And people are like, it wasn't very good or whatever. I'm like, man, I don't understand. Anyway, yeah, but I agree with you. I think you're absolutely right about that. Mukbang is here. Hello, Mukbang. Did you get to see The Five Bloods on Netflix? I have not yet. It was long and imperfect, but I still learned a lot and enjoyed it. I can't wait to see it. Imran Tariq sends in a super chat and says, is science fiction dead? Imran, no. No, sir, it's not. Imran, I'm assuming you're a sir. It's not dead. As a matter of fact, there's all kinds of you can still read the canonical great works of science fiction. There's great science fiction. I mean, let's see, the Salvation series that's new. That's something I'm reading. It's pretty good. Neil Stephenson, still publishing great books. As a matter of fact, there's tons of great science fiction. So it's absolutely not dead. Alexander Wilson is here. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's birth name was Ferdinand Louis Alcindor. Ferdinand Louis Alcindor Jr. My high school alumni alma mater, I think he meant to say. My high school alma mater beat Kareem's high school in 1965 to become the #1 team in the country. There's a big poster of the celebration in the lobby. I was born in 88. Kareem was a megastar. He was a megastar, but, I didn't know about his early years because, I encountered him he was the first basketball player other than, he was really the first basketball player I learned as a kid. And then, of course, I was a Sonics guy, so Slick Watts, Jack Sigma, Downtown Freddie Brown, 1978-79 world champs. But yeah, you're right. And don't think I'm going to come to you, Alexander, because there's going to be questions I'm going to need sooner rather than later, believe it or not. So yes, I'm coming, and I'm going to need those questions. Let's see. I've got Jeffrey Turner, a.k.a. MegaJetty1, sent in a $2 super chat. My Terminator film idea requires actor Dean Norris. I would watch a Terminator movie with Dean Norris. By But I think if you're going to come up with film ideas, you should come up with film ideas on your own. You've added a whole extra layer of difficulty if you are trying to work in previously existing franchises, which, yeah, it can be bad. This next letter comes from Arnold Schwarzenegger, misspelled, but I love it. Greetings, Rob. Hope you and your family are well. Thank you for answering my previous question about the possible age rating of Dune. I quite appreciated it. And yes, I'm not the real Arnold Schwarzenegger, but I like the guy, so I decided to use his name as a pseudonym. I have another inquiry. There are speculations that there will be a new Dune footage and possibly a trailer next month on 3 occasions. July 17th alongside Inception, the 22nd through the 26th of July at the virtual Comic-Con, or the 31st of July alongside Tenet. What do you think of the likelihood of this? I provided a few sources below. Well, Arnold, I think it's probably a pretty good bet. You know, no doubt, I think they probably were going to launch Dune at Comic-Con. I think we're 6 months out. It's now the time. Well, July will be 5 months out, so I do think it's the perfect time to launch the trailer for Dune. People are waiting for it. And why wouldn't you put it in front of Tenet? Tenet is the place to release it. So if Tenet comes out on the 31st, I'll bet you they have a special even IMAX trailer. I would imagine that. And you'll probably definitely see something at the virtual Comic-Con, I would imagine. So I think the odds of that are pretty great. If I were to hazard a guess, I would say you could probably bet on that, that something is going to happen. I mean, I think it would, don't you? I absolutely think so. So, by the way, who's not dying to see that? I know I am. Aaron Johnson is here. Aaron Johnson says, I thought I would share my thoughts on both Jerry Maguire and also as a bonus, another Tom Cruise film that I saw after the commentary, A Few Good Men. Although I may reference other military movies due to a what-if theory I have about the film. I'll start with A Few Good Men, then Jerry Maguire. My thoughts on A Few Good Men is that Tom Cruise plays Daniel Kaffee, a Navy lawyer who's quite eccentric and wants to win cases. He's teamed with Sam Weinberg, played by Kevin Pollak, and Joe Galloway, played by Demi Moore. Kevin Bacon plays Jack Ross, but while Kevin Bacon's Jack Ross is perceived as the antagonist that is irritating to the defense lawyers we root for, at the same time, when he has sit-downs with Dan Kaffee, you understand that he is his best friend and that he's only trying to protect him and his friends when preventing bad things happening during a court trial when dealing with a witness that Dan Kaffee deals with, whether it's Kendrick, Dawson, and Downey, or even Nathan Jessup. The funniest moment of the film is when Nathan Jessup got into a shouting match with Dan Kaffee and Jessup says the most ridiculous things that made me laugh. The funniest exchange from Jessup is his speech about protecting his unit, and when Dan Kaffee reacted, saying, "Did you order the code red?" and Jessup saying, "You're damn right I did." In the theatrical version, he says an obscenity, which then follows an angry speech at Kaffee. We as the audience aren't dumb. We can tell when Nicholson has crossed the line into absurdity. Now, and for Jerry Maguire, this film is great. The first act is shaky due to Jerry Maguire being at a hard job at a sports agency, but as soon as he gets to the second act, there's a paradigm shift from Jerry being hard at his job to wanting a relationship with Dorothy Boyd and her son Ray. And you can tell that Jerry is nice to Dorothy's son and being a good father figure. As soon as the audience hears him say to Dorothy she completes him, the audience cheers and Dorothy smiles. But I want to point out in this letter, Jerry Maguire is one of the movies in the Columbia Pictures Classics 4K collection. There are 6 movies in the set, the other being A League of Their Own, Gandhi, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and Dr. Strangelove. Yes, sir, all in 4K. I might know somebody who has that. Who might that be? I will end this really packed letter with a quote from A Few Good Men where Tom Cruise's Dan Kaffee says, "You don't have to have a patch on your arm to have honor." And that reigns true to Cruise's character in Jerry Maguire, where just because he loses his job as a sports agent, he manages to be nice to Renee Zellweger's character and Jonathan Lipnicki's character, Ray, and that changes Jerry from being a sports agent type person to being a family man because he changes his perspective. Sincerely, Aaron Johnson. Well, that's because, as many people know, our sister show, Whining About Movies, we did Jerry Maguire. And tonight, ladies and gentlemen, in a mere 4 hours at 7 p.m. tonight, the arbiter of cinematic excellence, Elizabeth Gwendolyn Bell, joins me for episode 40 of Whining About Movies, where we are going to talk about, wait for it, Event Horizon. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, because you never know what you're going to get on Whining About Movies. We jump from Jerry Maguire to Event Horizon, celebrating the announcement that Scream Factory is putting out, is it Scream Factory? A 4K version of Event Horizon. What a fun discussion we are going to have. So if you are a big Event Horizon fan, well then, jump on in for the big win and come watch Elizabeth's tonight, where we talk about Event Horizon. Elizabeth said to me that she had a lot of feelings about this movie, so there you go. Omar94 is here. Hi, Rob. I have 2 recommendations for you, your moderators, and the viewers for movies I like and think are underappreciated, so here goes. My first recommendation is a 1937 fantasy comedy called Topper, starring Cary Grant. This is the movie that gave Grant a boost in his career, getting him roles in movies like Bringing Up Baby and The Awful Truth, leading him to becoming one of classic Hollywood's A-list actors. My second recommendation is the 2012 animated film called Ernest and Stilicine. It is based on a series of children's books, so it's very family-friendly. Even though that might cause some not to watch it, I really do recommend it since it's very sweet and sentimental. The movie is in French, so you have to either find a version with subtitles or the English dub version. I've only seen the original version in French with the English subtitles. These are my 2 recommendations, Topper and Ernest and Celestine. I love Topper, and I think those are 2 great films. I have not seen Ernest and Celestine, so I can't say how great it is, but I would assume it is because you said it was, and I trust you. Let's see. Oh, this is a great. Wait, I got a letter I wanted to end with, but I got a couple more to read before then. Philip Flaherty's here. Hi, Rob. Phil from Ireland. I was amazed and proud to hear you read out my first letter on YouTube. You really do look after your fans. I love the community you've created. I hope the events of the last few weeks hasn't affected your confidence to say what you feel. I always like your maverick, outside-the-box way of thinking. Your chemistry with the late, great, sweaty John Schnepp on Heroes was a great comfort to me in hard times because I felt I was listening to friends, and I want to thank you for that. I owe you a few super chats. I'm saving up to give you a really big one. Well, thank you. I really want to support what you do. Keep it going, buddy. And if you're ever visiting Ireland, let me know. Your new nickname is the first man of physical media. You know it works. I like that. First man of physical media. Actually, that's pretty good. I will go there with you there. Let's see. I have a letter here. Where is it? Ian Samuels. Would you be surprised that Ian Samuels wrote a letter? Rob and fellow Robservationists. The return of cinema. Tenet is still promised for July release, but is that fair? Cinemas will be reopening, but with limitations imposed by the continuing threat of this damn virus, social distancing, limited seating, all of which will limit numbers. There's a chance, due to plausible contamination, snack stations providing beverages may not be able to provide all of the snacks we're used to. Is it a cinema experience without a bucket of popcorn? I don't know, man. I don't know. Other than the sound system and the big screen, much of the experience may be missing. Limitations that are appropriate and that what we should accept. Many films and even video games have received massive amounts of hype before release, and many times they have not lived up to that hype. Tenet has already had a lot of hype to it. Now many are claiming it to be the savior of cinema. They're expecting it to be the huge summer blockbuster that will save cinema from the present enforced lull. How can any movie live up to that kind of hype? That kind of hype could destroy a film. So why not take it easy, allow the cinemas to ease back into service? When things are relatively back to normal, then start bringing in the big guns, bringing in the Tenets and the Wonder Womens. You know what I mean. Not only is there the unbelievable hype, but also the safety to think of. With all the limitations cinemas will have, is it such a good idea to hit them with a potential summer blockbuster that will draw in crowds, maybe clouds too, you never know. While Corona is still active, is that a good idea? Personally, I think it's best to wait. Give the cinemas a chance to find their way with the new limitations, or even when things are back to relative normality. Is it worth the risk of infection just to see a movie? Ian, all good points, man. I cannot fault your reasoning. I honestly, I don't know, man. I don't know. I would say, look, I'm of two minds. I mean, we're watching corona outbreaks are still happening. Also, our economy unfortunately, it can't sustain long-term closing. But what it can do, and what we still don't, I don't understand this. I don't understand, like, right here, okay? Actually, let's try a little experiment, shall we? Here's a mask, all right? Hang on. Let's see. All right. Okay. So, I would assume through this mask that, let me make sure, is it on good? Does it look good? Huh? Does it make me look like I'm taking care of myself? All right. I'm going to do the rest of the show with this mask on, and I'm going to see just how obtrusive it is. First of all, it actually kind of feels good on my face. And breathing, not a real problem to breathe. Really, not much of a problem at all. It does steam up these glasses. You know, maybe, well, if I put these glasses out and keep them less close to my face, I don't know. But could I keep this on while I wore a movie? Or while I wore a movie? Could I wear this while I watched a film? If I was watching Tenet, I think probably about maybe 60 seconds after the Warner Brothers logo left the screen and the movie began, I would not, I wouldn't even know this mask was on. I would much rather be watching Tenet. Now, if I wanted to eat something, like munch on popcorn, I guess I would be, doing this. It would kind of defeat the purpose, but like you said, I just don't know. But I don't find wearing a mask problematic at all. I don't understand anybody that does. I'm watching people in this country rant and rave about their civil rights, and I'm like, we're still in the middle of a pandemic. We're watching cases spike all over the country, and we'll see where they're going to go. I honestly don't understand. I have not gone out in public without a mask on in months. It's not much of a bother. So anyway, we'll see. I'll just continue wearing this mask. And let's see. The people have been firing in some chats here. Let's see. Dean Alexander Wilson is back, and he says, my dad played college b-ball in the 70s and played with Tony Parker's dad, who was married to Eva Longoria, and his roommate's son date Taraji P. Henson. Wow, he partied with her once. What a lucky man. He said Bill Walton kicked his butt in basketball. You tried dragging Walton up and down the court for 50 minutes. That's awesome, dude. I love it. Jorge Granado sends in a super chat and says, received the Hills Run Red Blu-ray yesterday. Well, Jorge, first of all, thank you so much for the support. In case anyone didn't know, what Jorge is speaking about is the Blu-ray, the Shout Factory Blu-ray that is available as of yesterday for the Hills Run Red, a movie I produced, and Dave Parker and I produced 6.5 hours of brand new special features that will tell you everything you've ever wanted to know about this movie. Well, Jorge, I want to thank you, sir, for buying our film. I hope you enjoy it. Please report back. What did you think of the special features? I'd be very curious to hear what you thought. Give us a review. I can take it. Honest Asian Guy is here, and he says, white privilege is not the same thing as the N-word. As an Asian male, I too benefit from a similar privilege. Definitely not racist. Yeah, I don't think it is either. I'm glad you agree. Because it's true. There's nothing wrong with admitting that you're part of a privileged part of society that has never had to think about certain things. I mean, I've never once, when I've been stopped by the police, ever thought about whether I was going to be harmed. I've never thought about that. That's a privilege that I have for being white in the United States of America. That's a predominantly white. And there's nothing wrong to be reminded that. This mask is a little loose. That's why I keep adjusting it. Anyway, so I think it's important to remember that. Justin Tonner's here. Rob, I got The Great Escape, and it's a mad, 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 mad world from Criterion in the mail today. I have not got The Great Escape. Looking forward to revisiting them. Been a while since I watched both. I have It's Mad, 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 Mad World. I did not get The Great Escape yet. I need to get The Great Escape. All right. Justin goes on to say, I also watched Event Horizon last night and still love it. Hope they find the infamous cut footage for the upcoming Scream Factory Blu-ray in September. I know they've been looking at it. Looking for it. But, I don't know. I mean, I've heard it was, porn. It's all that violence that they're looking at, like what happened on the Event Horizon before it went to wherever it's going to go. Or it actually went there and it came back. And I don't know. I want to see it. Mukbang, the John Campy show says got a serious copyright strike for Sonic coverage. Have you ever had one? How did you handle it? I did. I've got on this channel, so you can get copyright strikes from people. They have copyright notices, like if you use music, they might demonetize your channel or something, or demonetize your episode. But if you get 3 serious copyright strikes against your channel by flagrantly violating copyright law, or somebody's copyright, they'll get rid of your channel. And if you get one, I don't know if any of you saw my review of the Dune script. They came after me and they struck my channel. And then I put it back up. I was cheeky and put it back up. And then they came and they leveled a real strike against me for talking about, and I had to wait 3 months for it to drop off my channel. I should repost that, which I thought was dumb. I mean, I understand I'm talking about Dune, but I was talking about the screenplay, but I'm also talking about the book. I could have fought it. I didn't, but I could have. I just didn't want to piss anybody off. So I had to wait 3 months for that to go away. But if you get 3 serious copyright strikes, and here's the thing, you can't just claim a copyright strike against somebody. You actually have to prove, you have to say, because people have come after me and they've actually given me strikes for music and stuff that they didn't own. And when all you do is you're like, well, I dispute that, and then it'll fall off. But that was the only copyright strike that was serious. Talking about this Dune script. Austin, hello, Augie, what's up? Rob, I just want to say hi to you and everyone. I'm catching up on all the shows I've missed. I really enjoyed the Fight Club review. Much love, bud. Well, Austin, hopefully you'll join us tonight for Event Horizon, because it's going to be a bang-up show, let me tell you. Alexander Wilson. Alexander Wilson says, who was a better actor, Kareem or Wilt Chamberlain? You know what? I'm going to give it to Kareem because I loved him in Airplane. He was so funny. You try and drag him up and down the car. I just love that. I think it's so great. Let's see. Okay. Elizabeth needs to pick the movies from here on out. Where the heck is Black Narcissus? The Playboys? The Cider House Rules? You can do way better. Listen, she picked Jerry Maguire. We did Jerry Maguire. That was her pick. She specifically asked to do something culty and fun that we could talk about. And because Event Horizon was just announced on 4K, I figured, hey, let's do that. And yeah, but I think Black Narcissus... Here's the problem, Alexander, about picking movies for whining about movies. We've found that it makes for a livelier show if we pick like the Cider House Rules, we're both going to love it. And then it's like, what do you talk about? Like how do you make the show really fun for people to watch? And it's harder. Like with Event Horizon, you know what? Tune in tonight at 7:00 for Whining About Movies, episode 40, Event Horizon, and you will find out. But like Black Narcissus is a classic of all time, and there's so much to talk about. I mean, it would be better if you're going to talk about like Nuns in Trouble that you'd find some obscure exploitation movie from the 70s. But yeah. Sean M. sent in a super chat and said, Rob, what was the justification for copyright striking you for discussing the hypothetical Dune screenplay? You know what? I guess for just the screenplay actually is copyright Warner Brothers. So for me talking about it, I think I could have fought it and won. And by the way, they just did an initial strike against me. Then I put it up again. Which was admittedly a dick move. And then they came after me and dropped the hammer. Because there's 2 different kinds when they say you get a copyright notice. There's 2 things. You get a notice, which happens all the time, or you get a real strike. And if I hadn't put it back up, I was being a dick, and they were saying, "Don't do that again, kid." It was definitely a slap down to me, and I admit it. I deserved it. But I thought it was lame that, especially because the script, I love the script so much. They just don't want, like, spoiler alert. Yeah, since 1960, Dune the novel has spoiled your movie since 1965. But no, and then Sean goes on to say, Rob, if that's too sensitive, it's okay to decline the answer. No, I love that you ask these questions. I think it's important. I think it's important so people know how YouTube works. I have no problem with that at all. All right, now here's a great letter. I love this letter. I saved this letter specifically for last. It comes from our boy Stubble McShave, one of our longest members of the Post-Geek Singularity. Now, somebody had written in yesterday and talking about how everything is interesting if you study it in detail. And I was agreeing. Like, when I was a kid, one of my favorite things, this is so weird to talk about now. I can't even imagine anybody who's younger than, 35 would understand this. But there used to be people that would sell you encyclopedias. Like, literally, there was like the encyclopedia salesman would come to your house. And there was really two. There was like the Encyclopedia Britannica, and that was like the Rolls Royce. And then there was like the World Book Encyclopedia, which was like the Lexus. And my parents, I wanted an encyclopedia set. And my parents thought it was important because I was an inquisitive kid. So we had an encyclopedia. And I used to read the encyclopedia for hours. It didn't matter. I would read them cover to cover. I just liked learning new stuff. Didn't matter whatever it was, I thought it was interesting. So, and I believe that. I think just about anything you could learn as soon as you hear about something you've never heard about before. You might not even have an interest in it. But when somebody is really into something, starts talking about it, I get into it. Like, oh, really? You ask people questions and stuff. And so Stubble, I'll just read his letter. Hello, Rob. Yesterday I sent in a tip on that almost everything is interesting if you study it in detail. When you look at it in a cursory glance, almost nothing is all that interesting. You have to nerd out about a subject to really appreciate it. I apologize in advance to anyone who will find this boring. This has very little to do with entertainment, any virus pandemic, or the protests going on. I've never found much interest in model making. My hands were never meant for detailed work. I struggle with drawing stick figures, and I've always had a slight tremor in my hand, which makes it very difficult to build models. I know that you have a passion for building models and is probably very fascinated by it since you've studied it so much. If I found a reason to delve down into the art of model building, I'd probably find it very fascinating as well. Hey, if you watch Frosted Snow or Genic on YouTube. In the tip yesterday, I said that I would write a letter about something I considered very boring, and you may find it interesting. So here it goes. I know it doesn't rain a lot in your part of California, but I'm sure you've experienced rain. Oh, dude, I'm from Seattle. Just before it rains, and as the first drops fall, you often sense an earthy smell that you know means there's rain in the air and that it soon will be pouring down. Well, I read a short news article about this, and in that article, they referenced the Smithsonian Magazine as their source. The article in the Smithsonian was interesting, and they in turn linked to other articles and studies. I went down a little rabbit hole and was suddenly very fascinated by the smell of rain. You see, the thing we smell is not some moisture difference in the air or just the smell of wet dirt. What we smell when it starts to rain is a chemical compound called geosmin. Geosmin? It's Geosmin. Geosmin? We humans, as well as many other animals and insects, are highly attuned to the smell of geosmin. It's something that we've evolved over millions of years in order to let us know if it was about to start raining. We've had use of the ability to sense the approach of rain for both growing our crops, as well as knowing if it'd be a good time to go hunting that deer or if the rain will hide its tracks. We humans are not known for our ability to smell things very well, but sensing the smell of geosmin in the air is something we're highly attuned to. In the article, they compared our ability to sense geosmin to that of a shark smelling blood in the water. A shark's blood sniffing ability in the water is about 1 part per million. It falls short when you compare that to humans sniffing geosmin. We can sense 100 parts per trillion. That means that we're 10,000 times more sensitive to that smell compared to sharks and blood. Now, there's obviously a difference between the density of molecules in the air compared to water, but still. So where does geosmin come from? What's its origin? Well, it turns out that it's produced by bacteria in the streptomycin family. So why do they do it? What's in it for them? It turns out that geosmin, alongside some other chemical compounds produced by the bacteria, attracts a small arthropod called a springtail. They arrive in huge numbers, and they are near the surface of the soil when it rains. You see, these streptomycin bacteria are like strawberries and not like mushrooms. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, you see, a strawberry wants to get eaten. It's the way it spreads in nature. If a strawberry isn't eaten, it's failed its mission in life. They want to get eaten, and they get pooped out, often by a bird, someplace else. A mushroom, on the other hand, doesn't want to get eaten. If it's eaten, it's failed its life mission, since they need to spread their spores on the wind. Well, the streptomycin bacteria wants to get eaten in order to spread to new territory by the arthropod. They have worked out a symbiotic relationship where one wants to eat the other, and the other wants to get eaten. So the bacteria send out chemicals in order to lure the insects when they're close because of the rain and the wet soil. The chemicals, of which geomycin is one, attracts the insects who eat the bacteria. The bacteria dies but sends out spores, a kind of emergency capsule. Willow could probably tell you more about it, through the arthropod's feces. We humans sense the geomycin in the air as the bacteria attracts the arthropods, and we can tell that it's about to start raining. The geomycin we sense in the air may not have generated exactly where we stand at that moment. It may have been generated where we stand, but since we can sense it at such a small concentration, it could just as well have been generated a mile away and drifted in the air to our waiting nostrils. This process has been going on for hundreds of millions of years. It's possible that dinosaurs could smell rain in the air by the same method. So there, one of the most boring things in the world, the smell of rain. But if you dig deep enough, there's something interesting there to find. At least, in my opinion. Stubble McShave. Stubble, what a great article. And once again, nailed it. Let me put this in the live chat. And there you go. See, come on, man. Now, you listen to that kind of stuff, the smell of rain, you'll never smell the same. You'll never smell rain in the same way again. See, I thought it was just ozone or something. And I thought it was asphalt, too, because that's part of it all. And I love that smell. I did not know that was the case. So, again, see, imagination connoisseurs, how much we can know. Brandon Valenzuela sent in a super chat and says, you should do a whining about movies on Showgirls. I actually like the film Nudity and Sex Aside. Brandon, that is a capital idea, sir. We did Flesh and Blood. I'm a huge Verhoeven fan. I'll tell you what we're going to do. Dieter sent me David Cronenberg's Crash. I will be doing that, but I think Showgirls, that would be a great episode. Ladies and gentlemen, now I come to the end of episode number 444 of Robservations, the show about something. I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank everybody for their support. I want to thank Richard and Haynock for moderating. I want to thank, of course, Mike Bodden for making sure I get these letters and making sure the website still exists. And that's all great. And thank everybody, all of you imagination connoisseurs for the letters. If you want to send me letters, or you want to send me videos, or you want to send me anything, you can do so at the website at Burnettwork.net. And I will read your letters on the air and all of that. And, of course, you can always send a tip or a super chat or any of that thing. And you can send tips 24 hours a day if you want. If you think up something in the middle of the night you want me to talk about, you can just do it and leave a question. And I'm here. And tonight, in a mere 3.5 hours, Elizabeth's Whining About Movies, episode number 40, Event Horizon. And with that I say, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And you know what? It's really not that hard. I am sitting here talking constantly, and it's really not that bad wearing a mask. I don't think I'm not infringing on my own civil rights. And if it could, make other people feel comfortable in the middle of a global pandemic, why not? It's not like California don't have spiking cases anymore, because wait, we do. So anyway, not so bad. Although I have to say, I think we were getting a little rooked at our hardware store. We got a big box of these, and they're expensive. They're not like cheap. Anyway, maybe I need to. I keep seeing like a Gundam mask. Like I kind of want to get a Gundam mask. I don't know. Maybe I'll get something more stylish. And for the person who said these glasses weren't doing me any favors, I know these are like $5 Amazon glasses. What can I say? We buy them in bulk, and I need to get some stylish Tom Ford frames. But to do that, you got to go in and have your eyes checked, which I should probably do anyway. But so every person you meet has a story to tell. Every person you meet has a story to tell that you haven't heard yet. And all you have to do is listen. Again. And with that, I hope to see you at 7 o'clock back on this channel where Elizaviews will be all about Paul W.S. Anderson's Event Horizon, which, by the way, has a surprisingly great performance by Lawrence Fishburne in it. And I'd forgotten he's basically the star, really. And him and Sam Neill, he's really good. I really like that. I really like seeing it again. And by the way, I own it on Blu-ray. It's not one of those movies I watch all the time. But anyway, I'll hope to see you then. It should be a lively conversation. And with that, I say, have a better day. I do say that. And I mean it.